The notification pinged on my phone at exactly 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, shattering the quiet focus of my private office. Property alert. Unauthorized entry at Riverside Penthouse. My hand, which had been reaching for the bespoke porcelain coffee cup resting on my desk, froze midair. I stared at the screen, the sharp, rapid pulse in my chest instantly escalating into a heavy, threatening drumbeat. That apartment was meant to be invisible. A ghost property. Nobody should have access to it. In fact, nobody even knew I owned the $20 million residence, save for the two professionals sworn to secrecy. My corporate lawyer and my financial accountant. I'd purchased the stunning, full-floor penthouse 2 years prior under the name of my holding company, kept it clinically pristine and deliberately empty. A monument. It was a tangible, glittering symbol of everything I had quietly constructed while fulfilling the exhausting, performative role of Trevor's supportive, socialite wife. My fingers were surprisingly steady as I navigated the security application on my phone. The cameras I'd had installed were state-of-the-art, military-grade, streaming the interior of the pristine living room in crystal-clear, high-definition quality. But the clarity of the image did nothing to cushion the brutal blow of what I saw. My husband of 8 years, Trevor, stood smack in the center of the apartment, his arm draped casually around a woman I'd never encountered. She was painfully young, perhaps 25, with long, unnaturally bright blonde hair, and a very distinct, heavily pregnant curve visible beneath the expensive fabric of her fitted cocktail dress. Yet even this wasn't the deepest cut. The absolute worst part was watching Trevor spread his arms wide, a grand, possessive gesture sweeping across the space, claiming it as his own domain. I cranked the volume on my phone, pressing the speaker close to my earlobe. "Welcome home, baby." Trevor's voice, usually a polished rumble, came through loud and clear, thick with false intimacy. "This is all ours now. $20 million of pure luxury, spanning the entire floor, and it's all waiting here for you and our son." The woman, this blonde stranger, let out a piercing squeal of pure, unadulterated delight and threw her arms tightly around his neck. "Oh, Trevor, I can't believe this is real. How did you manage to afford something like this? I thought you said money was tight because of the divorce proceedings." My stomach didn't just turn over. It seized, a painful, tightening knot of realization. Divorce proceedings? What divorce proceedings? Trevor let loose that signature, charming, slightly condescending laugh, the one I had initially fallen in love with a decade ago, and had long since learned to loathe. "Let's just say I've been smarter than Gabrielle gives me credit for, darling. While she's been busy playing consultant and jetting off on those quaint little work trips, I've been closing real deals and making real moves. This apartment is only the first step. Once the divorce is finalized, and I secure the final documents, we'll have everything we need. The company, the primary assets, the family holdings, everything." I had to grip the cool, sharp edge of my mahogany desk so hard my knuckles turned white, just to keep the scream of pure, visceral betrayal from escaping my throat. I was sitting in my actual private office, the one in the tower I owned 3 blocks away, and watching my own husband promise a perfect, stolen future to his mistress inside a home that belonged solely to me. The woman, Courtney, walked slowly to the towering floor-to-ceiling windows, her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. "It's so beautiful. I truly can't wait to bring our baby here, to start our real life together, openly." She turned back to Trevor, her eyes shimmering with genuine adoration. "When will you tell her? When exactly will you tell Gabrielle it's finally over?" Trevor moved up behind her, encircling her waist with his hands, drawing her back against his chest. "Soon, Courtney. Very soon. My lawyer is currently drawing up the final papers. I've made absolutely certain that everything is structured so she walks away with next to nothing. She'll be too stunned by the revelation to fight it properly, you see. By the time she finally comprehends what happened, you and I will be settled right here, raising our son, and Gabrielle will simply be ancient history." I watched Courtney lean back into him, a self-satisfied, smug smirk curving her lips. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. But frankly, She should have paid more attention to her husband. A man of your caliber needs appreciation. You deserve someone who truly sees your worth. They sealed the sentiment with a long, deep kiss right there in the living room I had paid for, and I was forced to squeeze my eyes shut for a brief, vital moment to breathe through the tectonic plate of pure, icy rage building in my chest. When I looked again, Trevor was proudly leading her through the apartment, swinging open the doors to bedrooms I'd never slept in, showcasing the gourmet kitchen I'd never cooked in, and pointing out the master bathroom with its massive infinity tub overlooking the metropolitan skyline. Every smooth word escaping his mouth was a carefully constructed lie. Every promise of domestic fantasy was predicated upon property that belonged irrefutably to me. The closing actually happened last week, Trevor explained smoothly as they toured the opulent master bedroom. The previous owner was in a desperate bind and needed to offload it fast. Got it for a steal at $20 million. Can you imagine? This place was originally listed at 28. I almost let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. I knew exactly what it was listed at because I was the one who had purchased it at full, asking price 2 years ago. There had been no desperate seller, no frantic stealing deal. Just me, purchasing real estate under my private corporate name, while Trevor genuinely believed I was out of town on a tedious business engagement. Courtney trailed her hand along the cold, perfect marble countertop in the master bathroom. It's flawless. Everything is absolutely perfect. Our baby is going to grow up in paradise. She paused, turning to Trevor with a slight, momentary crease of worry in her brow. Are you absolutely sure Gabrielle doesn't know about any of this? About us? About the baby? About this apartment? Trust me, Trevor insisted, pulling her close again, reinforcing his dominance. Gabrielle is utterly clueless. She's so focused on her little consulting gigs and her complicated spreadsheets. She hasn't noticed I've been meticulously planning our future for months. She thinks I'm just at the office late every night, grinding away. She has no concept that I've been with you, building something real and tangible. I saved the video file, my hands suddenly, remarkably steady despite the burning cold of the fury coursing through my veins. My mind, usually focused on logistics and capital returns, was now working purely on calculation. Trevor thought he was playing the long game. He thought he had been skillfully manipulating me while constructing a secret life for himself. What he failed to grasp was that while he'd been focused on a tawdry affair, I had been building an empire. An empire he knew absolutely nothing about. The consulting work he scoffed at as my cute little hobby? That was property acquisition and asset management on a massive scale. The business trips he deemed unnecessary or excessive. Those were closings on multimillion-dollar commercial and residential deals. The spreadsheets he mocked? Those tracked a meticulously managed real estate portfolio now valued at over $50 million. All of it built from the initial seed money, the $500,000, his family had entrusted to us 8 years ago. Money they believed was safely sitting in boring, conservative index funds. Money that had actually been systematically transformed into property after property after property. Each one purchased solely under my corporation. Each one completely legally separate from Trevor and our marital assets. On my phone screen, Trevor and Courtney had moved back to the living room. They were uncorking a bottle of champagne. My champagne, retrieved from the wine fridge I had stocked just before deciding the apartment wasn't quite right for my actual use. To us, Trevor declared, raising his flute high. To our future, to our son, and to finally being free to love each other the way we deserve to. To us, Courtney echoed, clinking her glass against his with a loud, triumphant ting. I watched them drink my champagne in my apartment while planning to dismantle my life, and something cold, heavy, and incredibly sharp settled deep in my chest cavity. It wasn't heartbreak. I had ceased truly loving Trevor somewhere around year 5, when the fundamental realization hit me that he viewed me as an accessory rather than a genuine partner. No, what I felt was surgical clarity. Trevor wanted to play games involving property and money? Fine. He had just strategically moved himself into the single piece of real estate that held the power to utterly destroy him. He had just voluntarily brought his pregnant mistress into the one apartment that would expose every single layer of his deception. And the most delicious part? He had absolutely no idea. I picked up the landline on my desk and dialed my lawyer, Patricia. Patricia, it's Gabrielle. I need you to immediately pull all documentation on the Riverside penthouse property. Every single document, every closing paper, every piece of irrefutable proof that I am the sole owner. Then, I need you to start proceedings for something else entirely. What exactly do you need? Patricia asked, her voice instantly shifting into sharp, efficient business mode. I allowed myself a slight, dangerous smile, watching Trevor kiss Courtney on my camera feed. I need you to help me destroy my husband's entire life. And I need it all to be completely, demonstrably legal. I'm listening, Gabrielle, Patricia affirmed. Good, I replied, the word clicking into place like the tumbler of a safe. Because class is now officially in session, and Trevor is about to learn precisely what happens when you decide to underestimate your wife. The artisanal coffee shop near my office tower had evolved into my designated thinking spot over the years, a neutral zone for strategy. I sat by the window now, my high-security laptop open, reviewing digital files that told a detailed financial story Trevor would never, in his wildest entitlement, have believed. The story of how his oblivious, seemingly placid wife had systematically become wealthier than his entire old money family combined. The timeline began 8 years prior, exactly 3 months after our wedding. Trevor's parents had summoned us into their dark, imposing study, a room so formal and serious that it instantly triggered my internal nervousness. His father had slid a thick, buff envelope across the polished mahogany desk. We want to give you young people a proper, solid start, he'd announced. $500,000. Invest it wisely. Trevor had barely glanced at the paper inside. Thanks, Dad. We'll just put it in stocks or whatever Gabrielle thinks is best. She's good with numbers. He'd said it dismissively, already mentally calculating the golf game he was missing. His mother, Eleanor, however, had looked directly into my eyes. Gabrielle, dear, we are entrusting this specifically to you. Trevor has never demonstrated an interest in sober financial planning. Make it grow. Keep it safe. I had promised solemnly that I would. What they didn't know, what Trevor definitely didn't know, was that I had secretly minored in both finance and real estate law in college. While Trevor had been coasting through a mediocre business school on the strength of his family name, I had been relentlessly studying property markets, advanced investment strategies, and long-term wealth-building tactics. Not because I possessed any money of my own. I had grown up in a cramped apartment with a single mother who drilled into me the terrifying necessity of financial independence. That $500,000 wasn't a gift. It was my one chance. I took 3 months to perform an intensive, localized study of the real estate market. While Trevor genuinely thought I was preoccupied with planning tedious dinner parties and shopping for new clothes, I was attending property auctions under an assumed name, networking aggressively with established investors, and absorbing every piece of information I could. Then I found it. A foreclosed duplex in an up-and-coming, but currently dilapidated neighborhood. Everyone else saw a financial disaster. I saw raw, untapped potential. I purchased it for $200,000, spent another $50,000 on renovations that I personally managed down to the last fixture, and 6 months later, flipped it for $400,000. A clean $150,000 profit on my very first independent deal. Trevor, predictably, never once inquired about the money's status. When I casually mentioned I'd made a good investment, he patted my head, a patronizing gesture suggesting I was a child who had earned a gold star, and immediately returned to watching a sports game. That singular, patronizing pat solidified something cold and resolute inside me. I took that initial profit and bought 2 more properties. Then 4. Then 8. Each time I renovated, significantly improved the assets, and either sold them for massive profit or retained them as high-yield rental properties. I formally created an LLC, Monarch Property Group, and systematically moved every single asset under that corporate umbrella. A structure that was completely legal and entirely separate from our marital holdings. Trevor's family had intended the money as a joint investment, but crucially, They had deposited it into an account solely in my name. The account was mine. Every property I purchased was purchased by Monarch Property Group, which I solely owned. My lawyer, Patricia, had ensured the legal framework was ironclad from the very beginning. Always protect yourself, Gabrielle, Patricia had advised during our first meeting years ago, especially when your husband shows such willful disregard for the money you are managing. I listened absolutely. Every document, every closing statement, every single transaction carried my name or my company's name on the proprietary line. Never Trevor's. He was so supremely disinterested in my activities that he never once requested to see a single piece of paperwork. By the third year of our marriage, I had turned that initial $500,000 into $2 million. By year 5, it was $10 million. By year 7, $20 million. Now, sitting in this coffee shop reviewing my digitized portfolio, I was staring at real estate assets and liquidity worth over $52 million. $52 million that Trevor knew absolutely nothing about. He genuinely thought I was just a consultant. That part was technically true. I did consult on property acquisitions for other high-net-worth investors. But what he believed was my primary job was actually just a minor side project. My real work was the intense, ceaseless management of my empire. The business trips were property viewings and closings. The late nights at the office, those were complex negotiations, zoning reviews, and renovation management. The spreadsheets he mocked, those tracked the rental income generated from 37 separate properties across 4 different states. I had been flawlessly careful. Separate, dedicated bank accounts for the business. A corporate credit card he had never seen. Tax returns filed separately. A strategy one convinced him was beneficial due to his family's complicated holdings. He had signed whatever I placed in front of him without ever bothering to read it. My mother would have been profoundly proud. She had raised me alone after my father abandoned us with nothing, working 3 difficult jobs just to keep us afloat. Never depend on a man for money, Gabrielle. She had instructed me over and over. Build your own security. Trust only yourself. I had taken that lesson to heart with religious fervor. Even as I played the role of the devoted, supportive wife, hosting Trevor's boring business dinners, attending his family's stifling events, I had been rigorously building my own impenetrable financial foundation. A foundation he couldn't touch, couldn't claim, and certainly couldn't take. The Riverside penthouse had been my celebratory purchase. After closing a particularly complex commercial deal that had netted me nearly $3 million in pure profit, I decided to acquire something extraordinary, something solely for myself, an ultimate reward. I had planned to eventually tell Trevor about it, perhaps using it as the moment of grand revelation. Look what I built while you weren't paying attention. Instead, he had somehow learned of its existence, likely through his family's pervasive real estate connections, and decided to claim it as his own trophy. He had researched enough to know the purchase price, but he hadn't researched the one critical factor, who the actual legal owner was. That singular mistake was going to cost him everything he held dear. My phone buzzed again. A text from the property management company. Additional entry logged at Riverside Penthouse. Same individuals as yesterday. Duration 4 hours. For hours. Trevor was spending 4 full hours in my apartment with his heavily pregnant mistress while I sat here, meticulously planning his utter destruction. The exquisite irony tasted like victory. I opened my email client and began composing messages with clinical precision. First, to my accountant. I require complete, certified documentation of all Monarch Property Group assets, including founding documents showing sole ownership. Also need documentation of the original $500,000 investment and its comprehensive growth trajectory year by year. Second, to my private investigator, James Morrison. Need complete background on Courtney Anderson. Employment, verifiable financial status, and relationship history. Also need continuous surveillance on Trevor Bennett's movements and any documented financial irregularities in his business dealings over the past 2 years. Third, to Patricia. Urgent meeting required ASAP. Divorce proceedings will be complex. Bringing documentation of all separate assets. Also need to discuss potential fraud issues regarding Trevor's claims about property he demonstrably does not own. I had learned, over 8 years of complex property deals, that success stemmed entirely from preparation. You researched everything, documented everything, and never initiated a critical move until you had analyzed every possible angle. Trevor was about to learn that the wife he dismissively pegged as a numbers girl had quietly evolved into a strategic player he couldn't possibly match. My laptop pinged with Patricia's instant reply. * can meet tomorrow morning. Bring everything. This sounds like it's going to be exceptionally interesting. Interesting was one clinical word for it. Devastating was another. Satisfying was, perhaps, the most accurate description of all. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the vast city I had quietly conquered. While Trevor hadn't been paying attention, somewhere out there in my $20 million apartment, he was making flowery promises to Courtney about a future built entirely on lies. He was plotting to divorce me and leave me financially destitute. What he completely failed to understand was that I didn't need anything from him. I had already built more than he ever would. His family's money, the money they trusted me to invest and protect, had grown into an empire that completely dwarfed anything the Bennett family had ever achieved. And tomorrow I would begin the process of making absolutely sure he knew it. Making sure everyone knew it. Trevor wanted a divorce where I walked away with nothing? Fine. He could have that divorce. But he would be the one walking away with nothing while I calmly retained everything I had built. The best revenge wasn't loud, emotional anger. It was quiet, unassailable success. And I had spent 8 long years building the most successful revenge imaginable. Now it was time for the grand unveiling. The electronics store clerk looked at me with thinly veiled curiosity as I purchased my 6th top-of-the-line, wireless security camera. Building a fortress? He joked, attempting light banter. Something exactly like that, I replied, giving him a cool smile that didn't remotely reach my eyes. I had spent the last 3 days personally overseeing the upgrade of every security measure within the Riverside penthouse. The property management company, which answered directly to me, had been more than happy to grant the building's primary owner access. After all, I owned the entire building, not just the penthouse unit. What they didn't ask was why the corporate owner needed to install additional, hidden cameras in her own luxury apartment. Smart people understood the value of silence. I now had cameras subtly positioned in every room, some hidden behind rotating modern artwork, others discreetly tucked into corners where they blended seamlessly with the minimalist design. Audio recording was enabled in every space. Motion sensors were activated to alert me the very moment anyone entered. Trevor genuinely thought he had secured a private, secret love nest. Instead, he had moved directly into the single most surveilled private apartment in the entire city. The footage collected over the last week had been simultaneously enlightening and infuriating. Monday afternoon, 3 p.m. Trevor and Courtney were entering together. He had clearly given her a key because she unlocked the door herself, giggling about how this was their secret palace. They'd spent 2 hours in the master bedroom. I'd watched just enough footage to irrefutably document their presence and the intimate nature of their relationship, then fast-forwarded through the rest. I had no need to torture myself with irrelevant details. Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. Trevor was alone this time, clearly talking on his mobile phone. Yeah, Mom. I'm stuck at the office. Big project. Might be here really late. Meanwhile, he was sitting on my pristine white leather couch, his expensive shoes propped up on my custom-made coffee table, and drinking my rare single malt whiskey. After the call ended, he made another one. Hey, baby. Coast is clear. Gabrielle thinks I'm working late. Poor thing. Come over around 8. Courtney had arrived at 8:15 p.m. They'd ordered takeout, charged to a credit card number I didn't recognize. A small detail that had sent me down a crucial financial rabbit hole. Wednesday morning, I met with my private investigator, James Morrison. He was a middle-aged man with sharp, observant eyes, and he spread documents across his desk with the efficient indifference of someone who'd handled thousands of similar domestic betrayals. Your husband has 3 credit cards you were previously unaware of, James stated flatly, pointing to printouts detailing high balances. Total debt across all three is approximately $270,000. And that, Gabrielle, is just what I've managed to locate so far. My hands had gone instantly cold on the edge of the chair. How is that even remotely possible? His family's company pays him nearly $300,000 a year, plus bonuses. Which is precisely where it gets interesting, James said, sliding another document toward me. An internal corporate HR record. His salary was $300,000. Past tense. About 6 months ago, the board quietly reduced it to $150,000 after some rather questionable expense reports came to light. He's been attempting to maintain his lifestyle by maxing out these credit cards and by what appear to be regular, large cash advances from the company operating account. Cash advances? My stomach twisted again. That's dangerously close to embezzlement. Not technically, not yet, James clarified. He's a senior executive with discretionary access to certain operational funds. But the amounts are highly suspicious. $50,000 here, $30,000 there. Always vaguely listed as business development expenses, but never properly documented or signed off on. I've cultivated a reliable source inside the accounting department who tells me the new CFO has started asking very pointed questions. I leaned back in the chair, absorbing the reality. Trevor wasn't simply cheating. He was actively, flagrantly stealing from his own family's company just to finance his affair and his pretense of wealth. The apartment he thought he could afford. The luxurious promises he was making to Courtney. All built on a shaky foundation of reckless debt and corporate fraud. There's more, James added, pulling out a final thin file. The offshore accounts you requested surveillance on. We found 2, both held in the Cayman Islands. Combined balance of approximately $400,000. Money transferred in small, calculated increments over the past 18 months. Let me guess, I said, the words heavy with resignation. He's been deliberately hiding money from the marriage to ensure I don't get it in the divorce settlement. That would be my professional assessment, James confirmed. Smart Money says he's planning to claim extreme poverty during the divorce proceedings while sitting comfortably on these hidden assets. Asterisk Smart Money. Asterisk Trevor had always arrogantly assumed he was the smart one in our marriage. The one with the privileged degree from the expensive school, the one born into the successful family. Meanwhile, he'd been committing fraud and hiding assets with all the subtlety of an amateur pickpocket. Now, back in the clinical quiet of my office, I watched the live feed from the apartment. Thursday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Trevor and Courtney were there again. This time, she had brought actual paint samples. I'm thinking a soft, buttery blue for the nursery, Courtney was saying, holding up color swatches against the wall of the second bedroom. Something calm and soothing. What do you think, Trev? Trevor wrapped his arms tightly around her from behind, resting his hands heavily on her stomach, a gesture of faux paternal pride. Whatever you want, baby. This is your house. Make it absolutely perfect for our son. Asterisk our house. Our son. Asterisk every single word he spoke was a clean, sharp knife in my resolve. Not because I wanted Trevor back. That painful ship had sailed long ago when I realized I was merely a decorative prop in his life, but because of the casual, breathtaking cruelty of it. The complete, entitled assumption that he could simply erase me, replace me, and take what was definitively mine to give to someone else. Courtney turned in his arms, her expression now serious, expectant. When will you tell her? Truly tell her? The baby is due in 4 months. I don't want to be hiding when our son is born. Soon, Trevor promised, kissing her forehead. My lawyer is finalizing the divorce papers now. It's all about precise timing. If I file now, while she thinks everything is perfectly fine, she won't have the critical time to start hiding assets or prepare. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to salvage anything. I'd actually laughed out loud in the quiet of my office when he first proposed the idea of hiding his assets. Hide assets? As if I had anything remotely connected to him that required hiding. As if I, the one who built everything, was the financial amateur. Meanwhile, he was the one with the labyrinth of deceit, secret credit cards, meticulously hidden offshore accounts, and brazenly embezzled corporate money. And what about her finding out about this place? Courtney had asked, her hand sweeping grandly toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. Impossible, Trevor had boasted, his chest puffed out with false confidence. The apartment is shielded, protected under a corporate identity. Even if she somehow managed to track down the existence of the property, she'd never, not in a million years, connect it back to me. As far as anyone knows, and that includes my wife, I'm simply renting it through a private, non-disclosure arrangement with some friendly acquaintance. By the time everything comes out, I'll be legally protected. A corporate name. My corporate name. Monarch Property Group. The irony was a beautiful, exquisite thing. He was trying to protect himself using the very empire I'd built from nothing, while he'd been doing little more than coasting on the fading sheen of his family's reputation. Monarch, my fortress, was about to become his tomb. I'd scheduled the critical meeting for Friday morning with Trevor's parents. Well, not Trevor's parents directly. That would have sent off immediate, flashing red alarms. Instead, I'd leveraged my extensive real estate connections, subtly suggesting that Robert and Margaret Bennett might be profoundly interested in an exclusive, high-value investment property that had just become quietly available. I painted a picture of a breathtaking, sun-drenched penthouse featuring spectacular, unobstructed city views and offering significant, guaranteed appreciation potential. They leaped at the opportunity with predictable speed. The Bennett family, I knew, had recently suffered some rather embarrassing losses in the stock market, a detail my analysts had provided. A pristine $20 million asset in a prime location, offered directly to them by a respected and discreet property investment firm, was exactly the kind of stability they were desperate for. The viewing, the main event, was scheduled for Saturday at noon. I double-checked Trevor's calendar, an action I could perform effortlessly since he was notoriously, carelessly lax about password protection. Saturday at noon, the calendar noted a lunch meeting with potential clients. In reality, according to the damning trail of text messages I'd compiled between him and Courtney, he was planning a romantic brunch, a celebratory rendezvous at my apartment. The timing was nothing short of flawless. Friday evening, the night before the collapse, I sat in my real office, the one in the sleek, modern building I owned 3 blocks from the penthouse, and meticulously reviewed my evidence one last time. It was a complete, horrifying narrative. High-definition video footage showing Trevor bringing Courtney to the apartment at least 8 times over the past 2 weeks. Crystal-clear audio recordings of him promising her a joint future, smugly discussing the divorce plans, and casually dismissing me as the clueless numbers girl. Forensic financial records detailing his spiraling personal debt, the coordinates of his hidden offshore accounts, and proof of his highly questionable company expenses, and the binding legal documentation proving, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that I owned the Riverside penthouse and had owned it exclusively for 2 years. My secured office phone rang, the unique tone reserved for my lawyer. "Patricia, I've reviewed everything you sent," she stated, skipping the pleasantries. "This is even better, even cleaner than I had initially thought. He hasn't just cheated. He's committed clear-cut fraud, both marital fraud by concealing significant assets and corporate fraud by misappropriating substantial company funds. His family could, quite easily, press criminal charges if they were so inclined. I'm not interested in the punitive effort of sending him to prison," I replied, my voice cool and even. "I am interested in making absolutely sure he walks away from this marriage with exactly what he deserves." "Nothing." "Precisely," I confirmed. "That won't be hard at all," she assured me, sounding faintly amused. "The prenup, the one he insisted upon thinking it would protect his assumed wealth, works entirely in your favor. It meticulously protects premarital and separately acquired assets. Since you built your entire property portfolio using money that was legally given to you to invest, and you funneled and managed it all under your own private corporation, none of it is, legally speaking, marital property. He cannot touch it. And the hidden offshore accounts? Those will have to be disclosed in the divorce filing. When they are, it will serve as concrete, indisputable evidence that he was actively trying to defraud you. That disclosure will play exceptionally well for us. The judge won't have a shred of sympathy for him." I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "Good. And the apartment?" "Ah, The apartment, Patricia said, and I could hear the enjoyment in her tone. That's my favorite piece of the puzzle. He's been using your valuable property to brazenly conduct his infidelity. When this truth comes to light, when his parents and the company board members witness him there with his pregnant mistress, he won't have a single leg to stand on, not morally, not legally, and certainly not financially. The viewing is tomorrow at noon. I will be there, Patricia promised. This is going to be spectacular. After we disconnected, I sat for a long time watching the live security feed one last time. Trevor and Courtney weren't there tonight, but the space was already stained by their plans. I could see the paint sample card still sitting innocently on the sleek kitchen counter. The bottle of prenatal vitamins rested next to the sink. The ultrasound photo, their future son, was affixed to the stainless steel refrigerator with a bright, childlike magnet. They had been constructing a false home in my apartment, planning a future dependent on my property, making grand promises with money Trevor didn't possess, all while plotting to take everything from me. Tomorrow, that dangerous delusion would shatter. Tomorrow, Trevor would finally learn the grave consequences of underestimating the woman he had carelessly dismissed as his numbers girl. Tomorrow, the secret empire I had methodically built would be revealed, and his flimsy house of cards would dramatically collapse. I saved all the accumulated footage one final time, backed it up to 3 separate, encrypted secure locations, and sent certified copies to Patricia's private server. Evidence preserved, elaborate plans set, the trap baited and ready. Now all I had to do was watch Trevor walk blindly right into it. Saturday morning arrived, cold and brilliantly bright. I stood in my hotel room, a sprawling suite at the Four Seasons that cost more per night than Trevor knew I could possibly afford, and selected my outfit with surgical care. A tailored charcoal gray suit, flawless in its cut. A crisp white silk blouse. Simple, elegant diamond earrings. The only jewelry that mattered, the ones my mother had gifted me before she passed. Professional, undeniably powerful, exactly the executive I had become while Trevor wasn't paying attention to anything beyond his own reflection. My phone displayed 11:45 a.m. In exactly 15 minutes, Trevor's parents and 3 key board members from the Bennett family company would arrive at the Riverside penthouse for their private viewing. My property management company had sent a series of detailed confirmation texts throughout the morning. At 11:30, VIP guests confirmed for noon arrival. At 11:40, guests entering parking garage. 2 vehicles. Perfect. Everything was moving with the synchronized precision of a Swiss timepiece. My other phone, the discreet one monitoring the apartment security cameras, showed Trevor had arrived early, at 11:15 a.m. He'd been busy setting the stage for his betrayal. The dining table was formally set with extravagant, ornate plates I'd never seen before, likely purchased with one of those illicit secret credit cards. Candles were strategically placed everywhere, and a lush bouquet of long-stemmed roses anchored the center of the table. The ice-filled champagne bucket was out again, chilling what appeared to be a very expensive vintage bottle. Courtney had arrived at 11:30, wearing a flowing blue maternity dress that unmistakably emphasized her pregnant belly. She'd squealed upon seeing the overly elaborate setup, throwing her arms possessively around Trevor's neck. "This is so beautiful," she cooed. "You're such a romantic." Trevor had kissed her deeply, then guided her solicitously to the luxurious living room couch. "Only the best for you and our boy. I wanted today to be incredibly special. A private celebration of our future together. Have you filed the papers yet?" Courtney had asked, settling into the cushions, her impatience clear. Monday, Trevor had promised easily. "My lawyer has absolutely everything ready to go. By this time next week, the divorce will be officially in motion. 6 months from now, maybe less, we'll be completely free to marry ourselves." Watching them, I felt nothing remotely resembling heartbreak or sadness. There was only cold, clinical calculation and profound, deep-seated satisfaction. Every word they spoke was being perfectly recorded. Every false promise Trevor made was meticulously documenting his ultimate betrayal. At 11:55 a.m., I received the final, confirming text, "Guests and elevator arriving at penthouse level." I immediately pulled up the hallway camera feed on my phone. There they were. Trevor's parents, Robert and Margaret Bennett. And the three distinguished board members I recognized instantly from company photos. James Peterson, Carol Jang, and Thomas Wright. All of them impeccably dressed, taking this potential 8-figure investment extremely seriously. Patricia stood with them, playing her role flawlessly as the confident property representative. Thank you all for agreeing to meet on a Saturday. The owner is very selective about potential buyers and wanted to afford you the first private opportunity before we list it publicly. 20 million is significant, Robert Bennett stated, his expression serious. But the location is undeniably prime. If the space truly lives up to the listing photos, the Bennett investment portfolio would benefit greatly from this acquisition. Margaret Bennett nodded, adjusting her scarf. We've been actively looking for high-end luxury property in this exact area. The appreciation potential is excellent. I watched Patricia nod and offer a professional, reassuring smile. She pulled out her key card. I had given her full, unlimited access as the official owner's representative. She slid it through the reader. The heavy door clicked and then swung silently open. On my phone, I immediately split the screen between the hallway camera and the interior apartment camera. Trevor and Courtney were at the dining table now, him pouring the sparkling champagne, her laughing throatily at something he'd just said. Neither of them heard the soft click of the door opening over the gentle background music he had playing. Patricia stepped inside first, followed by the formidable group. For a suspended moment, everyone froze, immobilized by the clash of realities. The Bennett family and the board members stared, stunned, at the hyper-romantic scene before them. Trevor and Courtney at the table, champagne glasses raised in a self-congratulatory toast, candles glowing, the dense cluster of roses between them. Trevor's face cycled through several horrifying expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, then dawning, sickening recognition, and finally, pure, unadulterated panic. The champagne glass slipped from his suddenly numb fingers and shattered violently on the polished marble floor. Mom, Dad, he choked out, his voice utterly strangled. What are you doing here? Robert Bennett's patrician expression had shifted instantly from professional curiosity to incandescent fury. What are we doing here? Robert's voice was dangerously low. What are you doing here, Trevor? This, as Patricia just informed us, is a property viewing for a massive potential investment. Margaret Bennett's eyes had locked onto Courtney, specifically traveling down to her very pregnant stomach. Her face went deathly pale, the color draining away entirely. Trevor, who is this woman? Trevor surged to his feet, nearly knocking over his expensive chair. I can explain. I'm looking at the property, too. For investment purposes. Investment purposes? Robert repeated the phrase, his voice now lethally calm, holding the silence. With champagne and roses and a visibly pregnant woman who is clearly not your wife. Where is Gabrielle? I had been watching this meticulous unraveling on my phone, timing my own entrance with mathematical precision. Now, I stepped out of the hotel room, hailing the car I'd arranged. The riverside penthouse was precisely 7 minutes away. I had planned this timing down to the second. Back on my screen, Trevor was stammering desperately. This is just a lunch meeting. She's a friend, a colleague. We were discussing a business opportunity. A business opportunity? Carol Jang, a notoriously sharp board member, interjected, her voice sharp as ice. Trevor, the table is set intimately for two. There are roses. You are drinking celebratory champagne with a pregnant woman while your wife is God knows where. Do not insult our intelligence. Courtney, meanwhile, had gone very quiet, visibly shrinking back in her chair. She looked frantically between Trevor and his granite-faced parents, finally realizing that something catastrophic had gone terribly wrong. Patricia stepped smoothly forward, her voice professional, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. Perhaps I can help clarify the situation for everyone present. This apartment is legally owned by Monarch Property Group, a private real estate investment corporation. The owner has held and owned this property for 2 years and has never authorized anyone else to access it outside of pre-approved personnel. Mr. Bennett, do you have the owner's explicit permission to be here today? Trevor's face flushed a deep, alarming crimson. I arranged access through a real estate contact. The apartment was supposedly available for lease and I've been considering renting it. That's interesting, Patricia said, her tone like silk over steel. Because this specific apartment has never, not once, been available for lease. The owner has never authorized any rental or sublease arrangements whatsoever. Mr. Bennett, how exactly did you gain access to this highly secured property? Before Trevor could formulate another weak lie, I pulled my car into the underground parking garage. My timing was indeed perfect. I rode the elevator up, my heart pounding a steady, controlled rhythm, but my expression composed and utterly calm. The elevator doors opened onto the penthouse hallway just as Patricia was delivering her final, cutting question. I walked toward the open apartment door, my expensive heels clicking a sharp, authoritative rhythm on the polished marble floor. I can answer that question, I said, stepping fully into the doorway, commanding the gaze of everyone present. Every single head snapped toward me. Trevor's mother let out a small, distressed gasp. The board members looked utterly confused. Courtney's eyes went saucer-wide with terror and realization. Trevor himself looked like he might instantly pass out onto the scattered glass shards. Gabrielle, he whispered, the sound barely audible. Hello, Trevor, I greeted him. I walked slowly into the apartment, my apartment, taking a deep, satisfying breath. I've always thought the natural light in here was spectacular, especially at this time of day. What are you doing here? Trevor's voice cracked on the words, the composure he had maintained moments ago entirely gone. I turned smoothly to Trevor's parents, offering them a genuine, if chilly, smile. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, it's truly good to see you. I sincerely apologize for the confusion surrounding this viewing. Let me introduce myself properly. I turned back to Patricia, offering a significant glance. I'm Gabrielle Bennett, sole owner and principal of Monarch Property Group and, consequently, the sole owner of this apartment. Patricia works for my company. The silence in the opulent room was absolute, thick, and crushing. Trevor had gone white as copier paper. Margaret Bennett spoke first, her voice shaking with confusion. Gabrielle, dear, I don't understand. You own this apartment? I do, I confirmed simply. I purchased it 2 years ago outright as part of my larger real estate portfolio. I've owned it free and clear since the closing date. I walked further into the space, gesturing casually around the luxurious setting that Trevor had tried to co-opt. I took the $500,000 your family so generously gave us 8 years ago, the seed money, and I systematically turned it into what is now a $52 million property empire. This penthouse was, until recently, one of my most prized acquisitions. Robert Bennett stared at me, dumbfounded. You've built a $50 million portfolio from the money we gave you to invest? $52 million as of last quarter's valuation. I corrected him politely. Yes. I've been meaning to show you the returns, but Trevor always insisted you preferred not to be bothered with the small details. I have all the documentation, of course. Every single property purchased, every transaction completed, all legally under my corporation. I can provide complete transparency on precisely how your initial investment grew. Your corporation, Thomas Wright said slowly, absorbing the gravity of the statement. Not a joint investment with Trevor? That's correct. The money was given specifically to me to invest. I invested it well, very well. All legally executed under my name and my company's ownership. I pulled out my phone, opening a critical file, and extended it toward Robert Bennett. Here is a summarized inventory of the portfolio. You'll note the Riverside penthouse is at the top of the list. Purchase price $20 million. Current appraised value $24 million. Purchased on March 15th, 2 years ago. While Robert Bennett scrolled through the dense document, his expression morphing from initial shock to something resembling awestruck admiration, I finally looked directly at Trevor. So you see, darling husband, When you told Courtney that you'd closed on this apartment last week, that was patently incorrect. When you told her you'd gotten it for a steal at $20 million, that was also incorrect, since the value has appreciated significantly. And when you promised her this was going to be your home together, that was perhaps the most utterly incorrect statement of all, because this apartment has always been mine. Courtney stood up abruptly, the sharp scraping sound of her chair loud in the silence. Trevor, what is she talking about? You said you bought this place. You said it was ours. Trevor couldn't seem to force words past his locked jaw. Let me save you the trouble of lying, I interjected, my voice pleasant but sharp and hard as polished glass. Trevor does not own this apartment. He doesn't own any apartment. What Trevor does own is approximately $270,000 in revolving credit card debt, 2 hidden offshore bank accounts containing stolen company money, and a very thorough, damning paper trail of embezzled funds from his own family's company. Isn't that right, darling? Margaret Bennett had tears welling in her eyes now. Trevor, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been stealing from the company. I haven't been stealing, Trevor insisted desperately. Those were legitimate business expenses. James Peterson pulled out his own phone, already navigating to a file. I'd like to see documented proof of those legitimate business expenses, Trevor, because our new CFO flagged nearly $300,000 in indiscretionary withdrawals with entirely inadequate documentation over the past 18 months. I think we need to have a very serious conversation about this. Trevor spun toward me, his expression suddenly shifting from shame to enraged recognition. You set this up. You brought them here on purpose. I invited potential investors to view my property. Yes, I corrected him calmly. I had absolutely no idea you would be here with your pregnant mistress, having a romantic champagne brunch in an apartment you don't own. That was entirely your own doing. Courtney was backing toward the door now, tears streaming down her face. You lied to me about everything. About the apartment, about the money, about... She pressed her hand protectively to her stomach. About all of it, baby. Wait. Trevor moved to follow her. Don't call me that. Courtney sobbed hysterically. You're still married. You lied about having money. This isn't even your apartment. What else have you lied about? She ran, fleeing the scene, her heels clicking rapidly down the marble hallway. Trevor started desperately after her, but his father's voice stopped him cold. Trevor William Bennett, you stay right there. Trevor froze instantly. I had never heard Robert Bennett use that tone before, cold, commanding, and absolutely lethal in its fury. You will sit down, Robert continued, pointing toward the table. You will explain yourself, and then you will listen very carefully to what happens next. Trevor sat, all the remaining fight draining out of him instantly. He looked small suddenly, sitting in my expensive chair at my expensive table in my expensive apartment that he had tried so hard to claim as his own. I remained standing, Patricia silently beside me. The board members gathered somberly around the table. Margaret Bennett stood by her husband, one trembling hand pressed to her mouth. I think, Patricia said quietly, taking charge of the proceedings, we have a great deal to discuss, and I think Trevor has an overwhelming amount of explaining to do. But first, let's be abundantly clear about something. Gabrielle owns this apartment. She owns this entire structure of deceit you witnessed. And based on what I am hearing, she owns a lot more than anyone in this room realized. Robert Bennett looked at me, a profound mix of respect and shock warring in his eyes. You built all this while married to my son. While your son thought I was just playing with numbers. Yes, I confirmed, meeting Robert's gaze steadily. While he actively dismissed my serious work as a cute little hobby, while he was meticulously planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing, I built an empire. And now everyone gets to see it. Trevor put his head in his hands, defeated. Margaret Bennett was silently weeping. The board members were already pulling out their phones, no doubt urgently texting the company lawyers and the CFO. The perfect Saturday morning had been flawlessly turned into Trevor's total, comprehensive worst nightmare, and we were truly just getting started. The massive conference room at the Bennett Company headquarters had never felt so cold, so sterile, so final. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I sat squarely at the head of the immense mahogany table with Patricia on my right, radiating calm authority. Across from us sat Trevor, looking utterly destroyed, flanked by two corporate defense lawyers his family had hastily hired for him over the weekend. Robert and Margaret Bennett occupied the far end, alongside James Peterson and the company's chief legal counsel. The weekend had been relentlessly busy, tying off loose ends. After Saturday's disastrous property viewing, I'd returned to my hotel suite while Trevor's family had taken him directly to their estate for what I could only imagine was the most excruciating, uncomfortable conversation of his life. Courtney had sent me a text message Sunday morning. Apparently, Trevor, in a moment of delusional affection, had given her my personal number at some point during their affair. I didn't know he was still married. He told me you were separated and the divorce was almost final. I'm truly sorry for everything. I'm leaving the city. I hadn't bothered to respond. Courtney was merely a symptom, I reminded myself, not the core disease. She was young and had believed the extravagant promises of a practiced liar. That was not my battle to fight. My battle was right here, in this meticulously polished conference room, with precise documentation spread across the table like weapons. James Peterson spoke first, his voice grim and official. We completed a preliminary emergency audit of the discretionary funds Trevor accessed over the past 18 months. The total amount is $342,000. None of it was properly documented as stringently required by company policy. Trevor's lead lawyer, an older, weary-looking man named Harrison Ford, no relation to the actor, thankfully, cleared his throat awkwardly. My client maintains these were entirely legitimate business expenses incurred on behalf of the company. Then he can provide receipts, Patricia said smoothly, sliding a detailed, damning document across the table toward the defense lawyers. Because we've thoroughly documented exactly where that money actually went. Would you like me to detail the misappropriations? Trevor slumped deeper into his chair, saying absolutely nothing. His face was a sickly gray, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. He looked like he hadn't slept a minute since the disaster on Saturday. Please do, Robert Bennett commanded, his voice utterly devoid of paternal warmth. Patricia opened a folder, her finger tapping the damning figures. $78,000 was withdrawn in raw cash over 14 months. No receipts, zero business documentation. Another $90,000 was charged to a corporate credit card at luxury retailers, high-end restaurants, and boutique hotels. The hotels are particularly interesting to us. All rooms were consistently booked for 2 people, and none of the reservations included Trevor's wife. The remaining $174,000 was transferred directly to 2 newly opened offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Margaret Bennett made a small, choked sound of distress. Robert's jaw tightened visibly. The offshore accounts, Patricia continued relentlessly, were opened 18 months ago, coincidentally shortly after Trevor began his relationship with Ms. Courtney Anderson. Our investigation strongly suggests he was actively hiding money from both his family and his wife in preparation for a divorce where he planned to claim minimal assets and walk away rich. Harrison Ford glanced sharply at Trevor, concern finally etched on his face. Is any of this, Trevor, untrue? Trevor didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely an audible rasp. I was going to pay it back. Pay it back? Robert repeated, utterly incredulous. With what money, Trevor? You've been living far beyond your means on credit cards. You have $270,000 in disclosed personal debt. Where exactly did you plan to source $340,000? I have investments, Trevor said weakly, looking nowhere. You mean the offshore accounts you were hiding? James Peterson's voice was scathing, dripping with professional contempt. The ones with $400,000 that you stole from this company? That money doesn't belong to you, Trevor. It belongs to the company, to your family, to the employees whose retirement funds you've effectively been gambling with. I wasn't gambling. You were stealing. Robert cut him off, finality in his tone. Call it what it is. You stole from your family's company to fund an affair while simultaneously planning to defraud your wife. And you did all of it in an apartment that belonged, unbelievably, to Gabrielle. an apartment you somehow never realized she owned. The profound, humiliating irony of that still amazed me. Trevor had clearly found out about the Riverside penthouse through some secondary real estate connection. Someone had probably been talking, mentioned a spectacular property in that building. He'd researched enough to know it was owned by Monarch Property Group, but he'd never bothered, not once in all his planning, to research who actually controlled Monarch Property Group. If he had expended the minimal effort required, he'd have found out, in stark black and white, that it was me. He'd have instantly discovered the sheer scale of the entire real estate empire I had meticulously constructed right under his arrogant nose. But Trevor had consistently dismissed my professional life, never taking my work seriously enough to look deeper than the surface. He'd lazily assumed Monarch was merely some anonymous, faceless shell corporation, easily manipulated, and he'd found a crude way to access the penthouse apartment, likely bribing a low-level building employee, without ever grasping the dramatic irony that he was essentially breaking into my private property. "Now, let us discuss the marriage," Patricia stated, her voice dropping slightly, pulling out a thick binder of documents that rattled Trevor further. She focused her gaze on him. "Trevor Bennett, when exactly were you planning to file for divorce?" "I don't have to answer that," Trevor muttered, running a nervous hand through his hair, attempting a facade of defiance that was rapidly crumbling. "Actually, you absolutely do have to answer," Patricia corrected smoothly, "because we have definitive documentation showing you consulted a prominent divorce attorney 3 months ago. The attorney's confidential notes from that consultation are, shall we say, quite illuminating. You specifically informed him that your wife possessed no significant assets and that you wanted to move quickly to file and finalize proceedings before she could potentially discover your own business investments. That is a direct quote taken verbatim from the legal notes provided to us." I watched Trevor's face, already pale with panic, redden instantly, a deep, furious flush traveling up his neck. 3 months ago, that pivotal point, I had still been playing the role of the oblivious, naive wife, perpetually traveling for my little consulting business. He genuinely thought I was clueless, too busy with my negligible endeavors to notice his grand schemes. Meanwhile, during those exact 3 months, I had been closing multimillion-dollar deals that made his supposed business investments look exactly like what they were, pitiful pocket change. Harrison Ford, Trevor's attorney, started to speak, his voice professionally steady. "My client, Mr. Bennett, has informed me." "Your client?" Patricia sliced in, her tone sharp and precise, interrupting him mid-sentence. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries. Your client has committed multiple forms of actionable fraud. Marital fraud, specifically by concealing substantial assets and preparing to commit perjury regarding his financial status in a divorce proceeding. Then there is corporate fraud, clearly evidenced by the systematic embezzlement from his own family's company. And let us not overlook potential criminal trespass, utilizing deceptive means to access a highly secured property that he had no ownership claim to whatsoever. Shall I continue listing the legal ramifications, Mr. Ford?" Harrison Ford looked at Trevor with a look of barely concealed, professional disgust. This was not a client whose case he could possibly defend. This was a disaster he had walked into. "Let's cut to the chase and move past the legal gymnastics." Robert Bennett intervened, his voice heavy with paternal fury and disappointment. "Trevor, you are fired from the company, effective immediately. The board will be filing charges for embezzlement, criminal charges, unless you return every single penny you stole, plus interest and significant penalties to cover the damages to our reputation. That condition is absolutely non-negotiable." Trevor's head snapped up, his eyes wide with genuine terror. "Dad, you can't do this. I'm your son." "I can, and I absolutely will," Robert retorted, his gaze hard and unforgiving. "You have publicly embarrassed this family beyond measure. You have stolen directly from the company that my own father built from nothing. You have systematically lied to your wife, impregnated another woman while still married, and made a complete mockery of everything we stand for. You are done here." "But I'll have nothing," Trevor whispered, his voice cracking with the realization of his total ruin. "No job, no money, Literally nowhere to go. You will have exactly what you deserve, Margaret Bennett said, her voice surprisingly cold and final. Which, as you correctly noted, is nothing. You were intent on leaving Gabrielle with nothing. Congratulations, Trevor. You have simply succeeded in leaving yourself with nothing instead. I spoke for the first time since the meeting began, breaking the sudden, painful silence. My voice was calm, low, and perfectly steady. I will be filing for divorce this afternoon. My attorney has prepared all the required paperwork, fully notarized and ready to be served. The prenuptial agreement you insisted upon will be honored to the letter. It protects separate assets legally acquired during the marriage. Since my entire multimillion-dollar portfolio was painstakingly built separately, using funds legally entrusted to me as a capital investment, none of it is, or ever will be considered marital property. You will have absolutely no legal claim to any of it. Gabrielle, please. Trevor turned to me, desperation blazing in his eyes, the terror now mixed with raw pleading. We can work this out. It was a mistake. I can explain everything. No, I said simply, meeting his desperate gaze without blinking. You cannot explain lying to me for months on end. You cannot explain stealing from your own family. You certainly cannot explain bringing your pregnant mistress into my penthouse apartment and promising her my life and my home. There is no explanation, Trevor, that makes any of that behavior acceptable. But we've been married for 8 years, he stammered, clinging to the only fact he had left. Yes, we have, I confirmed, gathering my documents and stacking them with deliberate precision. 8 years during which you consistently dismissed my work, patronized my intelligence, and arrogantly assumed I was too stupid or inconsequential to notice you were planning my total destruction. 8 years during which I quietly built an empire, an entire world, that you knew absolutely nothing about, simply because you never bothered to actually see me as anything more than an accessory. I stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. The divorce papers will be served tomorrow morning. The prenup is ironclad and legally sound, so I don't anticipate this process taking long. I will keep everything I built. You, Trevor, will keep the significant debt you've accumulated and the full, undeniable consequences of your own choices. What am I supposed to do? Trevor asked, the final vestiges of entitlement gone, and for the first time, I heard a genuine, raw edge of fear in his voice. I honestly don't know, I said, pausing at the door. Figure it out. The same way I had to figure out how to build a life from the ground up when you gave me $500,000 and promptly forgot about it. The way I had to figure out how to be worth something when you consistently treated me like nothing more than a decorative accessory. The way Courtney will now have to figure out how to raise a baby alone. Because remember, Trevor, you lied to her just as thoroughly as you lied to me. Patricia joined me, standing sentinel by the door. The offshore accounts that were used for concealment will be immediately turned over to the company as restitution for the stolen funds. The overwhelming credit card debt is solely your responsibility. And Trevor, I would strongly suggest you cooperate fully and transparently with the company's internal investigation. Otherwise, this swiftly ceases to be a family law matter and becomes a criminal matter, and you will be dealing with federal prosecutors instead of highly paid family lawyers. We walked out of the conference room suite, leaving Trevor slumped there, abandoned, sitting across from his high-priced but useless lawyers and his 2 furiously disappointed parents. In the hallway, Patricia paused, turning to me with a slight, knowing smile that was equal parts respect and victory. How do you truly feel, Gabrielle? Relieved? I said instantly, realizing with a rush that I meant it profoundly. I thought I'd feel vindictive, maybe triumphant, or even deeply angry, but mostly I just feel overwhelmingly relieved that the performance is finally over. It's not quite over yet, she noted. The divorce still has to be finalized. That's just paperwork now. I dismissed with a wave of my hand. The marriage has been over for years. I just finally admitted the truth, both to him and to myself today. My phone buzzed immediately. A text notification from James Morrison, my private investigator. Courtney Anderson returned to her hometown in Ohio late last night. Moved in with her parents. FYI. She's been posting on social media about learning hard lessons about trusting the wrong men. Doesn't mention Trevor by name, but the timing is devastatingly obvious. At least Courtney had a family support system to fall back on. That was certainly more compassion than Trevor deserved, but I couldn't help feeling a small, fleeting amount of detached sympathy for her. She had made bad choices, yes, but she had also been lied to by someone who was supposed to be a mature, authority figure in his own life. What's the next step? Patricia asked as we walked towards the elevator bank. Now? I pressed the button for the ground floor with a firm touch. Now I go back to my office and run my business. I have 3 high-value properties scheduled to close this week, one of which alone will net Monarch nearly $2 million in profit. I have a foundation to establish for women entrepreneurs, which needs my full attention. And, I paused, I have a very expensive apartment to sell, the Riverside penthouse, Patricia confirmed, nodding. Yes, I can't stay there now, knowing Trevor brought her there, promising her a life that wasn't his to give. It's tainted beyond recovery, I admitted. But that's financially fine. I'll sell it, and I'll use the significant profit to acquire something even better. Something that was entirely mine from the very beginning, with zero connections to him at all. The elevator doors opened, we stepped inside, and I looked at my reflection in the polished metal doors. I looked exactly the same as I had Saturday morning, professional, composed, undeniably powerful. But I felt fundamentally different. Lighter, unburdened, and utterly free. Trevor had tried to take everything from me while simultaneously giving me nothing. Instead, I had methodically stripped everything from him while keeping every single asset I had built. The irony of the outcome was deeply satisfying. The justice was absolute and perfect. And the absolute best part of the entire ordeal, I had orchestrated the entire takedown legally, methodically, and without ever compromising my integrity or ethics. I had simply revealed the truth. The immense empire I'd built, the magnitude of the fraud he'd committed, and the complexity of the lies he'd told. The truth had been more than enough to completely destroy him, because the underlying truth was that I had always been the powerful one in our marriage. I had just finally stopped pretending otherwise. The text came at precisely 11:58 a.m. Just as I was reviewing the final closing contracts in my office. Asterisk guests arriving now. I saved my work file and immediately pulled up the security camera feeds on my laptop. It was time to watch Trevor's world continue its spectacular second act collapse. Patricia stood professionally composed in the Riverside penthouse lobby, greeting Trevor's parents, Robert and Margaret, and the 3 key board members who had flown in specifically for this meeting. Everyone was dressed in severe, professional attire again, signaling the gravity of the occasion. This was no mere property viewing. This was a serious business inquest disguised as a follow-up. After the disaster of Saturday, the Bennett family and the board demanded answers. They wanted documentation. They needed to fully comprehend exactly how the daughter-in-law they had so effortlessly dismissed had managed to build a multi-million-dollar empire right under their very noses, utilizing the initial investment they had forgotten about. I had prepared a comprehensive, deeply detailed presentation. It included meticulous financial statements showing the explosive growth of their initial $500,000 seed investment into my current $52 million portfolio. There were detailed property acquisitions listed chronologically, complete with original purchase prices, renovation costs, current sale prices, or detailed rental income reports. Crucially, I included all corresponding tax returns, proving that every penny was legitimate, properly reported, and meticulously taxed. This was the full, unexpurgated story of Monarch Property Group, built one smart, calculated decision at a time while Trevor was busy not paying attention to anything real. But first, they were receiving a full, guided tour of the crown jewel itself, the apartment Trevor had arrogantly tried to steal. I watched Patricia lead them through the immense space on the monitor. As you can clearly see, Patricia announced, gesturing widely, this is approximately 4,000 square feet of unparalleled luxury living space. It boasts floor-to-ceiling windows with true 360-degree panoramic city views. There is custom Italian marble imported specifically for the kitchen and all 3 bathrooms. Smart home technology is fully integrated throughout the residence. The building itself offers 24-hour man security, a spectacular rooftop garden, a state-of-the-art fitness center, and white-glove concierge service. It's spectacular, Margaret Bennett said quietly, looking around with a weary expression. She looked genuinely tired, significantly older than she had just on Saturday. Finding out your only son was both a serial embezzler and a shameless cheater, all within the span of 48 hours, would certainly take its toll. Robert Bennett ran his hands slowly along the cool, polished granite kitchen counter, his expression grim. And Gabrielle purchased this 2 years ago? Yes, sir. March 15th, precisely 2 years ago. Patricia confirmed, her voice crisp and factual. The price was $20 million, paid in full from Monarch Property Group accounts. No mortgage, no leveraging, no loans whatsoever. The company had the capital to purchase it outright. Patricia pulled out a tablet and expertly showed them the digital closing documents. Here is the deed. You'll see Monarch Property Group listed as the owner, and Gabrielle Bennett as the sole proprietor and owner of Monarch Property Group. James Peterson, the board member who handled their legal affairs, took the tablet and scrolled rapidly through the documents, his face expressionless. This is legitimate. Everything's properly filed, properly documented. She actually owns this outright. He looked up at Margaret and Robert. She actually built all of this wealth. The $52 million portfolio, yes, Patricia gently corrected. Every property was purchased legally, renovated when necessary, and either sold immediately for profit or maintained as a long-term rental income stream. Gabrielle has been running an extraordinarily successful, highly profitable real estate investment company for 8 years. Your son just didn't know it, Mr. Bennett, because he never bothered to ask or look. He never took her work seriously, Margaret said softly, the realization a heavy weight. He thought she was playing at being a businesswoman, running a little consultancy, while in reality, she was being exponentially better at business than he ever was or could be. James Peterson concluded, and there was genuine respect in his voice now. Now, this portfolio is truly extraordinary. The documented return on investment is nearly 10,000% over an 8-year period. That is remarkable even by the most aggressive investment standards. Patricia allowed herself a small, proprietary smile. Gabrielle has a unique talent for identifying undervalued properties and knowing exactly how to improve them for maximum profit potential. She also possesses exceptional timing, buying precisely before neighborhoods appreciate and selling near market peaks. She turned your initial $500,000 investment into what is now generational wealth. Generational wealth that Trevor tried to claim as his own and used to woo his pregnant mistress, Robert said bitterly, the shame evident in his tone. Did he really think he could possibly get away with something this audacious? That no one would notice or check the facts? He wasn't thinking rationally at all, Patricia replied firmly. He simply saw an opportunity, a spectacular apartment he desperately wanted to show off to Courtney. He discovered it was owned by a corporation. He likely bribed someone in the building for access, then lied and told Courtney he had personally purchased it. He never once bothered to research who actually owned that corporation because his fundamental assumption was always that his wife couldn't possibly have built anything this substantial, this powerful, or this valuable. The tour continued through the master suite, the opulent bathrooms, and the private balcony overlooking the glittering cityscape. I watched Margaret Bennett's face closely as she took in the paint samples still sitting on the counter in the second bedroom, the room Courtney had planned to convert into a nursery. He brought her here, Margaret repeated, shaking her head, multiple times, planning a future with her, in a home that belonged entirely to his wife. The betrayal is... She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Comprehensive, Robert finished grimly for her. The betrayal is comprehensive of Gabrielle, of US, of the company, and of basic human decency. Our son has become someone I simply don't recognize anymore. They moved into the living room where Patricia had set up a full presentation on a large wall-mounted monitor. I know you came here today demanding answers, Patricia stated, switching on the presentation. Gabrielle wanted me to walk you through exactly how she built this empire, step by step. So there are absolutely no questions remaining about the legitimacy or the methodology. For the next riveting hour, I watched Patricia methodically guide Trevor's entire family through every granular detail of my business journey. The initial property purchase. That foreclosed duplex I had bought for $200,000 and sold 18 months later for $400,000. The rapid-fire subsequent investments, each one carefully researched and strategically timed. The legal creation of Monarch Property Group as a solid corporation. The expansion into multiple states. The diverse rental income streams that had become a stable, massive revenue source. She showed them photos of properties I had personally purchased and renovated with my own two hands in the early days when I couldn't afford to hire professional contractors. Properties I'd sold at the perfect moment, right before predicted market corrections. Properties I'd held long-term that had subsequently tripled in value. Every decision, every single investment, every calculated risk had been meticulously planned and careful. She never gambled, Patricia emphasized, her voice echoing slightly in the vast room. She researched exhaustively, she planned flawlessly, and she executed with precision. That is precisely why the portfolio is so successful, and it is also why Trevor never truly understood what she was doing. He had always relied on his family name and quick, easy deals. Gabrielle, conversely, was building something sustainable, a lasting dynasty. Robert Bennett sat down heavily on the edge of the designer couch, looking utterly defeated. We gave her $500,000 8 years ago and simply forgot about it. We told her to invest it wisely, and then we never asked about it again. Because Trevor told you not to bother her with mundane questions, Patricia supplied gently. He told you she was handling it, that it was boring financial stuff. He wanted you to believe he was overseeing everything, when in reality, he hadn't looked at the investments or the reports once in 8 years. He told us the money was in index funds, Margaret said, her voice barely a whisper. Boring, low-risk index funds earning steady, modest returns. The money was in high-return real estate, earning exceptional returns, Patricia corrected. Gabrielle sent annual, comprehensive reports to this address every year. Detailed, glossy reports showing the portfolio's immense growth. Did either of you ever actually see them? Robert and Margaret looked at each other, a shared, painful realization dawning. No, Robert said slowly, shaking his head. Trevor handled all the mail from Gabrielle's business. He told us he reviewed everything and that it was all fine. We trusted him. He was intercepting the reports. Patricia concluded, her voice devoid of judgment, just stating fact, and most likely throwing them away without reading them. If he had read them, even casually, he'd have known his wife was building wealth that absolutely dwarfed his own salary and income. He'd have known she was exponentially smarter and more successful than he had ever given her credit for. James Peterson was still scrolling through financial documents on the tablet, looking deeply impressed. This is going to sound cold, but strictly from a business perspective, Bennett Company should have been working with Gabrielle all along, not Trevor. Her investment acumen is clearly superior. The decisions she's made, the precise timing, the aggressive but calculated risk assessment, all of it demonstrates a sophisticated financial understanding rarely seen. We'd be happy to discuss potential collaboration, Patricia said smoothly, immediately seizing the opportunity. Gabrielle has been considering expanding Monarch Property Group to include investment partnerships with established, respected firms. Obviously, the current family situation complicates that immediately, but in the future, there might certainly be opportunities. I smiled, watching the calculated exchange through my laptop screen. Patricia was brilliant. She was actively turning this catastrophe into a potential major business opportunity, while simultaneously showing Trevor's entire family exactly what they had definitively lost by so carelessly dismissing me. What happens now? Margaret asked, her voice laced with anxiety. With the divorce, Trevor will surely fight for his share of the assets, won't he? He can certainly try, Patricia conceded. But the prenuptial agreement is crystal clear. Assets acquired separately during the marriage remain separate. Gabrielle built Monarch Property Group entirely on her own, using funds that were legally given to her to invest and manage. Trevor's name appears nowhere on any of the corporate paperwork, the deeds, or the accounts. He has no legal claim to any of it. So, he will leave the marriage with nothing, Robert reiterated, staring out the vast window at the city view. Technically, Patricia corrected. He will leave with his maxed-out credit card debt and the legal obligation to repay the money he embezzled from your company. So, actually, he'll leave with less than nothing. The room fell into a heavy, absolute quiet. I could see Margaret Bennett subtly wiping tears from her eyes. Robert stared out at the dizzying city, his jaw rigid with shame and regret. "We should have paid more attention," Margaret finally admitted, speaking to both Patricia and James, to what Trevor was really doing, and especially to what Gabrielle was quietly accomplishing. "We failed them both." "You trusted your son," Patricia said, her tone softening slightly. "That is not, in itself, a failure. Trevor's destructive choices are his own burden. But we could have seen this coming. The warning signs must have been there," Margaret insisted. "They were," James Peterson admitted quietly. The company's accountants had been flagging irregularities in Trevor's expense reports for months. "I ignored it because he was family. That was my mistake. We gave him far too much benefit of the doubt." Patricia began shutting down the presentation gracefully. "Gabrielle wanted you to have all of this information so you could understand the full, complex picture. She is not interested in vindicatively destroying Trevor or hurting your family unnecessarily. She simply wants the full truth to be known, so she can finalize this divorce and move forward with her life and her company. She's being far more gracious than Trevor deserves," Robert said, sounding shocked by my restraint. "After everything he's done, she could have pressed criminal charges herself. Criminal trespass at a minimum, possibly outright fraud. She could have," Patricia agreed. "But that's not her ultimate goal. She'd much rather focus on expanding her business and actively helping other women achieve financial independence. In fact, she's actively planning to launch a foundation soon to provide education and resources for women starting their own ventures." Margaret looked up, a spark of interest replacing the sadness. "A foundation?" "Yes. For women like Gabrielle, who had to build wealth quietly and meticulously because their partners or the system didn't take them seriously," Patricia explained. "She wants to create real opportunities and a supportive community for female entrepreneurs. The foundation will offer practical workshops, dedicated mentorship, and potentially seed funding for promising ventures." I watched Margaret's expression shift from sadness to something entirely new: determination. "I want to help with that foundation," she stated firmly. "I've spent my entire life supporting my husband's business, but I've never built anything of my own. I would genuinely like to be part of something that empowers other women." Patricia looked surprised, genuinely surprised, not just professionally. "I will absolutely pass that along to Gabrielle. I'm certain she would welcome your involvement." The viewing ended shortly after that. Trevor's family gathered their coats and briefcases, preparing to leave the beautiful, sterile penthouse. As they reached the immense front door, Robert turned back to look at the apartment one last time. "This," he said, his voice laced with regret, "could have been Trevor's. Not the apartment itself, but what it represents. True success, lasting respect, building something real and sustainable. He had every advantage in life, and he threw it all away for petty lies and desperate shortcuts. Some people never truly learn to value what they possess until they have lost it completely," Patricia observed calmly. "Unfortunately, by then, it is almost always too late." They left, and I watched Patricia calmly secure the apartment. She pulled out her phone and texted me immediately. That went even better than expected. "Margaret wants to help with the foundation. Robert is seriously impressed with your business acumen. And James Peterson mentioned potential investment partnerships before he left. You've turned a genuine disaster into massive opportunity." I texted back, "Good. That is what I do. Turn disasters into opportunities. Because that was exactly what Trevor had inadvertently given me." The opportunity to stop concealing my success. The opportunity to show everyone, including myself, what I had truly built. The opportunity to step fully, unapologetically, into my power. Trevor had thought bringing his mistress to the penthouse would mark the beginning of his new, free life. Instead, it had been the swift, spectacular end of everything he had ever known, and the triumphant beginning of everything I had been tirelessly working toward. Perfect timing, perfect justice, and a perfect outcome. The official divorce papers were served to Trevor on Wednesday morning at his new apartment. A modest, slightly run-down two-bedroom rental he had scrambled to secure after being abruptly kicked out of the spacious marital home. That property had been solely in his family's name, and they had wasted no time reclaiming it. Trevor's personal belongings had been summarily boxed up and left in storage. He'd had to scramble to find somewhere affordable to live, with his credit cards maxed out and his job non-existent. I knew all this because James Morrison, my private investigator, kept me updated with meticulous detail. Not because I was vindictive, but because knowledge was protection. I needed to know if Trevor was planning any kind of retaliation, legal challenge, or mental breakdown. According to James, Trevor had spent the first 2 days after our confrontation desperately trying to reach Courtney. She had blocked his number on every platform. He tried to access the Riverside penthouse again and had been immediately stopped and escorted away by security. I had made absolutely certain everyone in that building knew Trevor Bennett was not authorized on the property under any circumstances. He'd even attempted to go to his parents' primary residence and had been turned away at the electronic gate by their security staff. Now, sitting serenely in my pristine office and reviewing the final draft of the divorce paperwork, I felt nothing but profound relief. The papers were straightforward. No contest, no legal fight, just the clean, simple division stipulated by the prenup. Trevor would keep whatever meager personal assets he had brought into the marriage, which now amounted to basically his car and his clothes. I would keep the $52 million empire I had built. My phone rang. It was Patricia. The papers were officially delivered, she confirmed crisply. And Trevor signed them within an hour. No arguments, no attempts at negotiation, no requests for mediation. He finally knows he has no legal ground to stand on whatsoever. How long until it's legally final? In this state, with both parties in agreement and absolutely no contested assets, we can have the decree done in 90 days. 3 months, Gabrielle. You'll be legally free in 3 months. 3 months. 3 excruciatingly slow months, the legal minimum if we pushed hard. 8 years of history reduced to a 90-day countdown. The arithmetic of emotion never matched the cold calculations of the law. It felt cheap, rushed, and utterly disproportionate. Patricia leaned back, her expression tightening slightly. "There's a complication," she announced, her tone abruptly formal. "I heard from Trevor's counsel this morning, Harrison Ford. He's requested a sit-down. Apparently, Trevor insists he needs to speak with us." "Talk about what?" I scoffed, crossing my arms. "There is absolutely nothing left to negotiate or discuss." "Harrison was unusually insistent," Patricia countered. "He claimed Trevor has sensitive information, something specific about protecting yourself." My stomach turned. "That sounds exactly like a trap, Patricia." "It does," she agreed readily. "But Trevor is entirely stripped of leverage. He has no assets, no power, and nothing we want. Perhaps," she mused, adjusting her cuffs, "it's a final act of self-interest disguised as a warning. It might be strategically unwise to ignore it." Against my ingrained wariness, I conceded. We set the meeting for Friday afternoon in Patricia's conference room, neutral, recorded, and surrounded by my legal team. Friday descended, a miserable conjunction of cold rain and oppressive gray skies. I chose the charcoal suit, my personal battle dress, again, needing every layer of professional armor I could muster. Patricia's offices, housed 30 stories up in a razor-sharp tower of glass and chrome, were designed to be monuments to unassailable financial power. The conference room itself was a sleek, intimidating cathedral of polished mahogany and panoramic city views, intentionally calibrated to remind opposing counsel that they were operating out of their depth. Trevor walked in precisely at the scheduled moment, flanked by Harrison Ford. The change in him was visceral. His expensive tailored suit hung off his frame, suggesting a rapid, worrying weight loss. His face was gaunt, etched with sleeplessness, and shadowed by severe dark circles. He avoided my gaze completely, a stark contrast to the aggressive confidence he had always projected. "Thank you for meeting with us," Harrison said formally, breaking the oppressive silence. We settled. Trevor and Harrison on one side of the vast table, Patricia and I facing them. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," Patricia interjected immediately, her voice cutting through the silence. "Mr. Ford, what is the urgent, time-sensitive information Mr. Bennett believes my client requires?" Trevor finally lifted his head, his eyes meeting mine for the first time, a fleeting moment of pain and shame. "I want to start by saying I'm genuinely sorry for everything," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "The affair, the secrecy, the lies, the apartment. All of it. I was wrong. Deeply and spectacularly wrong." I remained utterly silent, unwilling to validate the performance. An apology, however dramatic, was irrelevant to the legal reality. He pressed on. "I know you don't want to hear this from me, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but there is something critical you need to understand. Something that is about to become public knowledge, and I wanted you to hear it from me first." "Get to the point, Trevor," Patricia snapped, her patience dissolving. Harrison opened a thick, labeled folder and slid a summary report across the polished table. "This is the forensic accounting analysis for the Bennett Company," Harrison stated flatly. "It meticulously details Mr. Bennett's financial improprieties over the last 18 months. The embezzlement, the hidden accounts, everything." I waved a dismissive hand. "We are well aware of the specifics." "You mean the $342,000. Trevor nodded slowly. "What you don't know is the corporate reaction. They are not offering me a civil repayment option. They are pressing criminal charges. My father wants me prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." I felt nothing resembling pity. "You stole from your family's company, Trevor. Consequences are inherent to crime." "I know, and I deserve them," he admitted painfully. "But here is the nexus. When this goes to a public criminal trial, every financial record, every investigation, every detail becomes public domain. And that includes the specifics surrounding the $500,000 my parents gave us 8 years ago." A cold dread settled in my chest. I froze. "What about it?" Harrison took over, his voice measured. "The $500,000 the Bennett family provided to Trevor and Gabrielle was structured, technically, as a loan, not a gift." "That is completely false," I asserted immediately. "It was a gift. Robert Bennett explicitly told us it was seed money for a proper start." "Verbally, yes," Harrison conceded. "But the controlling legal documents state otherwise. The Bennett family's trusts and tax attorneys are notoriously meticulous. For tax efficiency, almost all large family disbursements are structured as demand loans. It's a standard, if predatory, practice among the ultra-wealthy." Patricia was already retrieving files, her movements sharp. "Show me the original documentation." Harrison provided copies of the 8-year-old agreements. Patricia pored over the archaic legal language, her face growing grim with every line. After several oppressive minutes, she looked up, her gaze heavy. "He's correct, Gabrielle. It is structurally a loan. The repayment terms are deliberately vague, essentially payable at the family's discretion. But legally, it is a debt, not a transfer of gift funds." My thoughts spun violently. "So what does that translate to, practically?" Trevor answered quietly, his voice weighted with self-reproach. "It means, technically, you legally owe my family $500,000. And when the criminal trial begins," Trevor continued, "my father's legal team will deploy every tactic to recover funds. They will aggressively pursue repayment of that loan. Moreover, they plan to assert that the $52 million portfolio you successfully built was constructed using seed money that was never legally yours to invest." "That is completely untrue." I felt a wave of pure, white-hot anger. "They explicitly gave me the capital and told me to invest it, to make it grow. I executed their instructions flawlessly. I know, Trevor whispered. I've tried to explain the investment directive to him, but he's consumed by rage. Not just at my embezzlement, but at the betrayal of the divorce. His attorneys are advising him that if he forces the loan repayment, he could potentially claim an equity stake in your entire portfolio, arguing it constitutes marital property built from a shared, borrowed asset. That is utterly baseless. Patricia shot back, slamming her hand lightly on the table. Statute of limitations on debt collection applies here. Not on thoroughly documented loans between immediate family members. Harrison smoothly countered. I verified the relevant case law. The Bennett financial documents are, regrettably, ironclad. I focused my gaze entirely on Trevor, trying to penetrate the facade of regret. Why are you telling me this now? He met my gaze, a flicker of genuine decency in his tired eyes. Because you deserve to know the weapon they are preparing. Because despite everything, I don't want my father's lawyers to ambush you. And because, he inhaled slowly. You built something genuinely extraordinary, Gabrielle. It would be wrong if my spectacular mistakes ultimately destroyed that too. Patricia was already scribbling furiously. We will fight this tooth and nail. Gabrielle operated under a clear assumption of good faith. She was instructed to invest, and she did so brilliantly. No judge will punish success based on funds she was explicitly told to manage. Perhaps not, Harrison conceded. But the defense will be prohibitively expensive, and the public relations fallout will be devastating. The headline is already written. Wife builds $52 million empire using husband's family capital, then files for divorce. It won't matter that the timeline is flawed or that you had no knowledge of the loan structure. The narrative will simply be that you used their money to fund your exit from their son. The air in the conference room was suddenly thin. The firm ground of my hard-won justice felt terrifyingly unstable. My entire financial edifice was resting on a predatory tax loophole. Trevor broke the silence. I am going to plead guilty to the embezzlement charges, he stated, his voice almost hollow. No plea bargain, no fighting it. And when I do, I will make a formal, public statement to the court regarding the $500,000. What kind of statement? I will state that my parents explicitly instructed you to invest that money however you saw fit. That they never once requested repayment or even alluded to it being a legal loan. That you acted in complete and demonstrable good faith. Why? I demanded, the question escaping before I could temper it. Why would you go that far? Because it is the absolute truth, he insisted. And because you deserve better than to have your life's work undermined. You built that empire based on your own intelligence and sheer labor. The source of the seed money does not negate your accomplishment. There is one more thing, Trevor continued, the transition jarring. I've been communicating with Courtney. She finally responded to a letter where I took complete responsibility for everything. She is struggling. Alone, heavily pregnant, living back home with her parents in a small, conservative town where the gossip is unavoidable. She has no resources for decent legal counsel regarding custody or formal child support arrangements. I stared blankly. And you expect me to help her? Disbelief colored my tone thickly. No. Trevor responded instantly, his eyes widening. Absolutely not. I would never ask that of you. But I wanted you to know that I am signing away my parental rights immediately. I will not be in that child's life. It wouldn't be remotely fair to saddle him with a father who is currently going to prison and who cannot provide stability or financial support. Courtney deserves to start fresh without my complications. Patricia leaned in, her gaze penetrating. Let me be unequivocally clear, Trevor. Your forthcoming guilty plea and especially the accompanying sworn statement about the loan, they are extremely beneficial for Gabrielle's legal defense. But they guarantee you are going to prison for a significant term. Embezzling in excess of $300,000 from a family enterprise carries severe consequences. Do you fully comprehend the cost of this choice? I do, Trevor replied, devoid of fight. And I deserve it. I stole from my own blood. I betrayed my wife. I lied to a woman who trusted me and got her pregnant under false pretenses. Prison is the bare minimum of what I owe. And the statement regarding the loan, Patricia pressed, must be offered unconditionally. You cannot expect Gabrielle to offer assistance, advocate for your sentence, or provide anything in return. You are making this statement because it is the truth, not because you seek leverage. I seek nothing from her, Trevor affirmed. I simply want to ensure I accomplish one correct thing before my life collapses entirely. We spent another 60 minutes reviewing the logistics and the documentation Harrison provided. Copies of the loan structuring, the full forensic reports, and internal correspondence between Trevor and the corporate counsel. Patricia meticulously synchronized plans for his impending guilty plea and public statement. When Trevor and Harrison finally departed, leaving the room feeling colder and emptier, I slumped back in my chair. Do you believe him? I asked Patricia finally, the question heavy with doubt. She remained silent for a long moment, organizing the stack of damning papers. I believe he has finally reached the terminus of his selfishness, she analyzed coolly. He understands that attempting to destroy you provides him no exit strategy. Whether that stems from genuine remorse or pure, cynical pragmatism, I cannot ascertain. But the formal statement he is offering, that will save you years of litigation and massive legal exposure. But I still owe his family $500,000, I stated flatly. Technically, yes, Patricia confirmed. But following Trevor's public testimony, after the court hears evidence of your good faith investment and explicit instructions from the Bennett family, no reasonable judge will mandate you surrender a percentage of your portfolio. At absolute worst, you will be compelled to repay the original $500,000. Given your current net worth, that is unequivocally manageable. Manageable. I had leveraged that initial sum into $52 million, and now I was potentially forced to return the principal. It tasted like defeat, a psychological loss that defied the mathematical reality of my overwhelming profit. What is the next immediate step? I asked, needing a directive. The next step, Patricia said firmly, pushing the files into a briefcase, is that you return to running your $52 million empire. Trevor will face his necessary consequences, and we ensure your foundation launches precisely on schedule. Do not allow this attempt at financial sabotage to derail what you have so meticulously built. You committed zero error. You were provided capital with explicit instructions to generate wealth, and you performed brilliantly. That is not criminal. That is not morally ambiguous. That is simply phenomenal success. I desperately wanted to recapture the visceral, clean certainty I had felt just days prior, when the walls had closed in on Trevor. But the current reality was messier. The narrative was now tangled. The victory felt less absolute. Trevor was facing prison. Yes, but I was facing a year of aggressive legal defense, intense public scrutiny, and the bitter requirement of writing a $500,000 check to the very family who had marginalized me for 8 years. Life, it turned out, was a poor canvas for a simple revenge fantasy. Justice was rarely served without substantial cleanup fees. Winning, sometimes, meant grudgingly accepting that the prize was marginally smaller than anticipated. Nevertheless, I had won. Despite the complications, the looming PR battles, and the financial bite, I had constructed something magnificent from mere potential. I had unequivocally proven every detractor and underestimator wrong. I was still standing sovereign, while Trevor's world lay in rubble. That had to be sufficient. 6 weeks blurred into intense legal proceedings, relentless media coverage, and meticulous reputation control. Trevor's formal guilty plea dominated the headlines. Bennett heir pleads guilty to embezzling over $300,000, screamed the business pages. But his accompanying court statement had created an equally significant tremor. Standing before the magistrate, dressed in a clearly ill-fitting suit purchased from a discount rack, a final, humiliating visual detail, Trevor delivered his testimony regarding the original capital. 8 years ago, he stated, his voice surprisingly firm under the glare of the cameras. My family provided funds to Gabrielle Bennett for investment purposes. They instructed her to manage it wisely, to make it grow. At no point did they indicate this was a debt. They never requested accounting, and she believed it was a gift intended to launch our married life. She took that capital and invested it with demonstrable, extraordinary skill, building a remarkable enterprise. My subsequent actions, my betrayal, my lies, my theft, do nothing to diminish her accomplishment. She acted in absolute good faith, utilizing funds she was explicitly directed to manage. That unambiguous public testimony instantly crippled Robert Bennett's legal strategy. The father's team, eager to claim ownership of my portfolio, suddenly found their primary argument, that the money was illicitly obtained debt capital, weakened beyond repair. Patricia seized the opportunity, negotiating a sharp settlement. I would repay the original $500,000 in principal, and zero else. No accumulated interest, no claim whatsoever on the portfolio equity, and certainly no percentage of my $52 million in profit. Writing that check felt like the highest insult. It wasn't the sum, $500,000 was less than 2% of my current liquid assets, but the principle of the matter. It felt like paying a fine for being too successful, a penalty imposed by the very people who had once deemed me unworthy. It implied that turning $500,000 into $52 million was somehow morally suspect because the initial capital originated from the dynasty that had continuously dismissed me. Yet I signed the check. I settled the debt. The divorce was finalized precisely 3 months after I had filed the initial paperwork. There was no argument, no ugly battle, just the sterile process of signing papers that terminated 8 years of my life. I was legally Gabrielle Bennett, single woman. The name, Trevor's name, was technically disposable, but I retained it. I had built Monarch Property Group and my reputation under the name Gabrielle Bennett. To discard it now felt like retreat, and I refused to run from a success I was fiercely proud of. Trevor was currently serving an 18-month sentence in a minimum security facility, eligible for parole in a year. While not a decades-long term, it was a sentence sufficient to incinerate any plausible future career path. Margaret Bennett, who remained, remarkably, deeply involved in the foundation, confirmed that the family had implemented tough love, entirely cutting Trevor off financially. He would emerge from prison with nothing but the residue of his choices. Courtney, meanwhile, had delivered a healthy baby boy. The single photograph she posted online before locking down her account showed the infant nestled in her arms, beautiful and perfect. "Starting our new life," read the caption. "Just me and my son building something real." Trevor was absent from the image and the text. There was no overt rage, only quiet, fierce determination. I considered contacting her, offering financial planning resources or support for single mothers. But Patricia was quick to caution me. "Let her have her peace," she advised. "Any contact from you, regardless of your intentions, will simply serve as a painful reminder of her deepest humiliation. Allow her to heal independently." I accepted the wisdom. Courtney, like me, would forge her own path through sheer necessity, resilience, and the determined refusal to allow one man's failures to define the rest of her story. I listed the Riverside penthouse and it sold almost instantly for $24 million, a clean $4 million profit on the initial investment. The buyer, a tech executive moving cross-country, was seduced by the panoramic views and exclusive amenities. The closing was bittersweet. That apartment had been the tangible manifestation of my greatest triumph, yet it was irrevocably linked to Trevor's ultimate betrayal. Selling it was a necessary severing, a closing of that poisonous chapter. I used the proceeds to secure something entirely new, a stunning contemporary residence nestled high in the hills outside the city. It was a masterpiece of glass, natural light, and intentional privacy. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a dedicated home office, and a separate guest house that I immediately began converting into a state-of-the-art teaching space for the Foundation's educational workshops. This property was mine from the ground up, untainted by marital history or dark memories, offering a clean, expansive space in which to construct the next phase of my life. The Monarch Rising Foundation officially launched last month, dedicated to empowering female entrepreneurs. The name coalesced for me late one evening while I reviewed initial applications. Monarch, representing the stable power of my company, and Rising, signifying both my ascent and the upward trajectory I intended for these women. Margaret Bennett had dedicated herself to the foundation with surprising, fervent energy. She contributed a substantial amount of personal wealth, explicitly noting it was her separate inheritance, not family money, and attended every workshop. She took on several ments and became a vocal advocate for true financial autonomy within her privileged social sphere. For 40 years, Margaret confessed to me over morning coffee, I was the ideal corporate wife. I hosted the dinners, I smiled for the investors, I curated the connections. But I never constructed anything that was fundamentally mine. Watching you build Monarch, Gabrielle, made me painfully aware of what I surrendered. It is absolutely not too late, I assured her. You are actively building this with me now. I am, she agreed, her expression softening. And it is profoundly satisfying. It feels like I am finally achieving something that matters, something that transcends merely looking impeccable in a society photograph. In its inaugural month, the foundation had already funded and supported the launch of 12 businesses. Everything from a small bespoke catering operation and a high-end boutique, to an online store specializing in handcrafted jewelry. Each venture represented a woman seizing definitive control over her economic destiny. A tiny seed of independence that I intended to nurture into something formidable. Next week, I was scheduled to teach a property investment workshop. 20 women had registered, eager to learn the fundamentals of buying their first rental unit or flipping a starter home. I had spent weeks preparing the curriculum, aiming to distill 8 years of high-stakes learning into actionable, replicable steps. The sustained media glare surrounding Trevor's fall had, ironically, become a powerful asset for the foundation. The headline "Wife Builds $52 Million Empire While Husband Embezzles and Cheats" provided a compelling, resonant narrative, particularly appealing to women who had felt dismissed or undermined. With Patricia's strategic guidance, I carefully selected key interviews. A business profile titled The Quiet Success, a real estate podcast, and a painful but necessary appearance on a national morning show. The hosts were, predictably, more interested in the drama than the P&L reports. I consistently pivoted the conversation back to financial independence. The best revenge is profound success, I stated during the television segment. Not because you are aiming to wound anyone else, but because constructing something meaningful for yourself is far more deeply satisfying than tearing down another person's life. The clip went viral overnight. The sentiment struck a powerful, universal chord. I now sat in my new, sun-drenched home office, reviewing the latest portfolio statements. $51 million, technically down from 52 after the $500,000 repayment to the Bennetts, but I was already aggressively recouping that capital. 2 new high-potential properties were under contract, and rental income remained robust. The foundation was expanding rapidly. Everything I had built was not only intact but actively thriving. My phone rang just as I closed the ledger. I checked the screen and smiled instantly. Hey Daniel. Hey yourself. Are we still on for 7 tonight? Absolutely. 7 o'clock sharp. Perfect. I'll pick you up. Daniel. He was the most unexpected, welcome development. We had reconnected 3 months earlier when I hired his contracting company for the guesthouse renovation. He was professional, exceptionally skilled, and, most importantly, genuinely engaged by my work. He asked intelligent, insightful questions about property investment, the foundation's mission, and my long-term strategy. He listened to my answers as if they held true weight. We had started with coffee after the work finished, moved to dinner, and recently took a quiet weekend trip to the coast where we spent hours walking the beach, discussing everything and nothing. It wasn't yet a serious relationship, and perhaps it wouldn't escalate, but it was easy, grounded, and respectful, qualities my 8-year marriage had entirely lacked. Daniel perceived me as an equal. More accurately, he saw me as someone exceptional, not for having endured a betrayal, but for having forged an empire from raw ambition. He celebrated my drive and my success, and he never once attempted to belittle or minimize what I had accomplished. Different from Trevor? Patricia had inquired one afternoon when I casually mentioned him. Completely, I replied. Trevor wanted an accessory, a beautiful object to validate his shallow success. Daniel wants a partner, someone whose intellectual strength he not only welcomes but actively seeks out. I wasn't rushing into anything with Daniel. The echoes of my past marriage were still too loud, too recent. My divorce was still painfully fresh, and my life felt like a foundation still settling after an earthquake. But the undeniable comfort of having someone who genuinely saw and supported the vast scope of what I was building, the foundation, the company, the empire, felt profoundly good. It was restorative, felt healthy. It felt like the affirmation I deserved after years of having my capabilities ignored, minimized, and utterly dismissed. An email notification chimed softly on my laptop, pulling my focus away from the financial reports. It was a message from the Foundation's program director. "Gabrielle, you need to see this application for the business grant program. This woman's story is incredible." Curiosity piqued. I clicked open the attachment. The application was from a woman named Rachel, 42 years old, recently divorced, proposing a consulting firm focused on guiding other women through the treacherous waters of separation and helping them meticulously rebuild their financial lives. Her narrative was jarringly familiar. A husband who had maintained exclusive control over the money, who had systematically chipped away at her confidence until she felt financially incompetent, and who, in the end, had tried to leave her with nothing but debt and despair. But Rachel hadn't succumbed. She'd fought back, pouring herself into learning about personal finance, investment strategies, and securing her own future. Now, she wanted to light that path for others. I read through her detailed business plan, genuinely impressed by the depth of the research and the sheer resilience embedded in every thoughtful projection. At the very end of the application, she had included a personal statement, a few paragraphs that stopped me cold. I saw Gabrielle Bennett's interview where she talked about success being the best revenge. That resonated with me because I realized I'd been so focused on cataloging what my ex-husband took from me, the time, the emotional energy, the sense of safety, that I hadn't truly grasped the scale of what I could build for myself unimpeded. This business plan represents my future, a future not defined by what I lost, but by the tangible assets and opportunities I'm creating. I want to help other women realize they have more power, financial, intellectual, and emotional, than they think they do. Just like Gabrielle showed all of us. I leaned back in my chair, a warm, expansive feeling blooming in my chest. This specific moment of connection was the core reason the foundation mattered so deeply. Not just because I could easily afford to fund it, but because my story, messy and complicated and imperfect as it was now acting as a catalyst, helping other women see possibilities they hadn't dared to imagine before. I immediately replied to the program director. "Approve the grant for the full amount," I typed, "and ask Rachel if she'd be willing to speak at our next advanced workshop. I think our participants would benefit immeasurably from hearing her journey firsthand." My phone rang again almost immediately, cutting through the silence of my office. Margaret Bennett. The screen flashed her name, signaling news of significance. "Gabrielle, darling, I have wonderful news. The corporate sponsorship from Henderson Group came through. They signed the paperwork this morning. They're committing $2 million over 3 years to the foundation's operational budget." "That's fantastic. I knew that meeting was promising." "It is. And there's more. The Henderson Group CEO wants to meet with you personally next week. She's extremely interested in discussing potential high-value real estate investments with Monarch Property Group. Apparently, she's been following your explosive success very closely. Another opportunity, massive in scale, another door swinging wide open, another chance to exponentially expand the scope of what I had so carefully and secretly built." "Set up the meeting," I said, my voice crisp and professional. "Next week, if possible." After I hung up, I stood and walked to the enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows in my office. The view spread out before me. Gently rolling hills and deep forest, a vista of unparalleled privacy and profound peace. This was my new home, my clean slate, the solid foundation for whatever colossal structures I chose to build next. 8 months ago, I'd been standing in a dimly lit coffee shop, staring at security footage of Trevor escorting his pregnant mistress into my apartment, an image of devastating betrayal. 8 months ago, I'd been obsessively planning revenge, calculating the precise vectors of destruction, preparing to systematically tear down everything Trevor thought he had built. But revenge, I realized, wasn't what had sustained me through the agonizing aftermath. Revenge wasn't the fuel that helped me navigate the brutal legal battles, the invasive media attention, and the complicated, brutal truth that justice in the real world was messy and victory was rarely absolute. What had truly sustained me, what built my spirit back stronger than ever, was the same relentless determination that had built my empire in the first place. The unwavering compulsion to create something meaningful. It was the refusal to be diminished, the commitment to utilize whatever raw materials life handed me. Even opportunities born from the cruelest betrayal, to construct something infinitely better, more lasting, and more powerful. Trevor was in federal prison paying a heavy price. Courtney was quietly raising her baby, out of the spotlight. The Bennett family was recovering, slowly, from the shame of the public scandal, and I was here, in my beautiful, self-made home, running my spectacularly successful company, launching a foundation that genuinely mattered, and planning dinner with a man who respected my ambition as much as he valued my presence. The fallout from Trevor's betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had done the opposite. It had freed me. It freed me to stop hiding my success in the shadows. It freed me to stop pretending I was less intelligent, less powerful, or less capable than I truly was. It freed me to build an empire even bigger, more complex, and far more public than the one I had created in secret. And that freedom, that opportunity to step fully into my power without a single apology or moment of hesitation, that was worth more than any cold revenge could ever deliver. 9 months post-divorce, spring had fully arrived, painting the landscape with a fragile beauty. Cherry blossoms dotted the trees. The days stretched longer and warmer, bringing with them a sense of new beginnings that felt almost too perfect, too serene, to be real. I stood in the guest house on my property, now officially designated the Monarch Rising Education Center, watching 25 women arrange themselves comfortably in the beautifully renovated space. We had installed ergonomic chairs, massive screens for detailed financial presentations, and working tables designed for collaborative strategizing. Everything was designed to make the intimidating subjects of business and finance feel accessible, warm, and inviting. "Thank you all for coming to our advanced property investment workshop," I said, moving to the front of the room. "I know many of you attended our introductory sessions last month, where we covered the basics of building equity. Today, we're going deeper. We will focus on advanced strategies, how to identify emerging markets before they peak, how to precisely calculate renovation ROI down to the last dollar, how to negotiate effectively with seasoned contractors, and perhaps most crucially, how to compete successfully against massive corporate buyers." The women in the audience were wonderfully diverse in age, background, and life experience. Some were young professionals, eager to front-load their wealth building. Others were middle-aged women restarting their lives, navigating the terrifying economic void left by divorce or widowhood. A precious few were older women who had spent their entire lives supporting others and were finally, deliberately investing in themselves for the first time. Rachel sat beaming in the front row. She had spoken at our last workshop, sharing her inspiring, raw story of financial rebuilding after her devastating divorce. Her consulting business was already thriving, expanding faster than she'd predicted. She already managed 12 dedicated clients and had a growing waiting list. She told me last week that she was actively scouting properties to buy her first investment asset. "I want to build an empire like you did," she'd said with a determined smile. I'd laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. "Start with one property, Rachel. The empire comes one smart decision at a time." Now, teaching these women about the practicalities of cash flow analysis and the critical importance of market timing, I felt a deep, profound sense of fulfillment, a feeling I had never once experienced during my 8 empty years of marriage. This was purpose. This was meaning. This was the powerful act of using my hard-won success and unique knowledge to generate real, tangible opportunities for others. After the workshop ended, several women lingered, staying behind to ask specific, complex questions. One woman, perhaps 50 years old with streaks of silver woven into her dark hair, approached me last, her expression hesitant. "Thank you for this," she said simply, her eyes glistening. My husband left me 2 years ago, and honestly, I've been terrified about money ever since. Absolutely paralyzed. But hearing you explain it all, showing us clearly that it's not as complicated or abstract as it seems, it makes me think I can actually do this. You can, I assured her, resting a hand briefly on her arm. You absolutely can. Start small if you need to, but the most crucial step is simply to start. Don't wait for perfection. She smiled, a tiny, relieved tremor in her eyes, and thanked me again before she gathered her briefcase and left, walking with a noticeably firmer step. Margaret Bennett appeared framed in the doorway moments after the last woman departed, surveying the empty room. That was magnificent, Gabrielle. You're a natural teacher, articulate and powerfully motivating. Thank you for being here, Margaret. Where else would I be? This foundation is the most meaningful, tangible thing I've ever been part of. She settled gracefully into one of the plush chairs, gesturing for me to join her. I have updates on the expansion plans. Over the past few months, Margaret and I had worked tirelessly on growing Monarch Rising beyond just our local area. We had successfully secured targeted funding for satellite education centers in 3 major cities. We had partnered with several key universities to offer accredited certification programs. Crucially, we had created a robust online platform to reach women who couldn't attend the in-person workshops due to geography or conflicting schedules. The foundation had become bigger, more impactful, and more widespread than I had ever dared to imagine during those initial quiet planning stages. The Seattle location is confirmed and finalized, Margaret said, pulling out her tablet to share the data. We have the space leased, the executive director hired, and 12 workshops already scheduled for the fall launch. Portland and Denver are nearly finalized as well, just awaiting final lease signatures. That's incredible momentum. It is. And there's something else, Gabrielle, that I wanted to discuss. Margaret's expression shifted, becoming markedly more serious, her posture straightening. Robert and I have been talking extensively about Trevor, about everything that transpired, and about the years leading up to it. We want to make a formal apology to you. I shook my head immediately, dismissing the idea. You don't need to apologize for Trevor's choices, Margaret. His actions were his own. Not for his choices, for ours, she insisted softly, leaning forward. For dismissing you for 8 years. For never once asking about your work or taking your business acumen seriously. For trusting Trevor blindly to handle everything when we, as a family, should have been paying closer attention to both him and to you. You couldn't have known what he was doing behind closed doors. Maybe not. But we absolutely could have known what you were doing. We could have celebrated your success, which was obviously vast and significant even then. We could have recognized your talent and your formidable intelligence. Instead, we treated you like decorative, pleasant scenery at family dinners. And that, Gabrielle, was profoundly wrong. I was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the sincerity and the weight of that admission. Thank you for saying that, Margaret. It means something important to me. We also want to do something more concrete, more lasting. Margaret pulled out a crisp document, laying it flat on the table between us. This is a commitment from the Bennett Family Foundation to fund Monarch Rising for the next 5 years. $2 million annually, unrestricted funding that you can use however you see best to fuel growth. I stared at the figures, the magnitude of the commitment dizzying. Margaret, I can't possibly accept that. You can, and you will, she stated firmly, pushing the document closer. This isn't charity, Gabrielle. This is a strategic investment in something truly meaningful that is changing lives. And it's Robert's and my way of saying emphatically, we see you now. We see what you've built. We see what you're capable of. And we are profoundly sorry that it took our son's catastrophic failure for us to finally recognize it. I took the document, emotion tightening the muscles in my throat, a strange blend of validation and closure washing over me. I truly don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing. Keep empowering these women. Keep building your platforms. Keep showing everyone what is possible when someone believes fiercely in themselves. After Margaret left, I sat alone in the education center, the afternoon light streaming through the windows, looking at the Bennett Family Foundation commitment. $10 million over 5 years. Enough to expand the foundation significantly, enough to help hundreds, perhaps thousands, of women build their own unshakable financial independence. From betrayal to this. From Trevor trying to steal my apartment and leave me destitute to his own family funding the engine of my new purpose. The transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. My phone buzzed. Daniel, how did the workshop go? Really well. These women are so eager to learn, so hungry for knowledge. It's genuinely inspiring to watch. I'm not surprised. You're inspiring. Listen, I know this might be too soon to mix things, but I wanted to ask you something important. My heart rate picked up slightly, anticipation mixing with excitement. Okay, my construction company has an opportunity to bid on a major renovation project. A stunning historic building downtown being converted into mixed-use space. Luxury residential units on top, high-end commercial retail on the bottom. But I definitely need a significant financial partner, someone with serious experience in property investment and development strategies. I immediately thought of you. I smiled, unable to hide the pleasure in his genuine request. Are you asking me to be your business partner, Daniel? I'm asking if you'd seriously consider it. I respect your expertise completely. I trust your judgment implicitly, and I think professionally we'd work brilliantly together. No pressure though. If you're not interested, or if you feel it's too complicated given that we're also dating, I will completely understand. Send me the project details, I said, my voice firming with resolve. Let me look at the numbers and the risk assessment. But yes, I'm interested. Very interested. After we hung up, I realized I was genuinely, thrillingly excited about the possibility. Not just because of the project itself, though it sounded incredibly promising, but because Daniel had approached me as an equal, asking for genuine partnership rather than seeking rescue, subordination, or emotional support. This was what healthy partnership looked like. Mutual respect, shared strategic goals, and a clear recognition of each other's distinct strengths. It was a universe away from my marriage to Trevor, where I had been forced to hide my greatest strengths just to avoid threatening his fragile, enormous ego. I gathered my workshop materials and securely locked up the education center. As I walked back along the winding path toward my main house, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the business magazine that had profiled me 6 months prior. They wanted to do a follow-up story. The Empire Grows. How Gabrielle Bennett turned personal betrayal into lasting purpose. I had long since stopped trying to avoid the betrayal narrative. It was inextricably woven into the fabric of my story now, whether I liked it or not. But I had powerfully learned to control how that story was told. It was no longer about the poor, victimized wife destroyed by a cheating husband. It was about the intelligent woman who built massive success in silence, and then, when forced into the light, refused to let betrayal define her future trajectory. That narrative had immense power. It resonated deeply with people. And if my publicly shared story could help other people, particularly other women facing similar financial uncertainty, see their own untapped potential, then perhaps having my private life exposed to the world was worth the price. My mother would have been so proud. She had passed away 4 years ago, before Trevor's exposure, before the divorce, before the foundation was a reality. But she had known about my real estate investments. She had been the only one I had told in those early, secretive years, and she had been utterly delighted. "You're doing exactly what I taught you, darling," she'd said with a knowing smile. "Building your own security, making absolutely certain no one can ever take your power away. Trevor doesn't know the full extent," I'd admitted. "Good. Keep it that way until you're ready to tell him. Some men," she'd warned, her voice dropping, "simply can't handle their wives being more successful than they are." She had been profoundly right about that. Trevor hadn't just been unable to handle my success. He had been completely oblivious to its existence until the moment it was too late and it consumed him. Inside my house, I poured a glass of rich Cabernet and settled into my home office wing. The Henderson Group meeting had, predictably, led to a highly profitable partnership managing several of their commercial properties across the state. The profit-sharing agreement was generous, and it had instantaneously introduced me to a powerful network of other high-achieving female executives and investors. Opportunities were multiplying exponentially, each success leading directly to 3 more. My personal portfolio was now up to $58 million, having quickly recovered from the Bennett family repayment and then surging well beyond it. I had just closed on a complex mixed-use property similar to the one Daniel was proposing, commercial retail on the ground floor, luxury apartments above. The project was already 60% pre-leased before construction was even complete. I was building an empire that felt more solid, more enduring, and more visible than ever before. But far more importantly, I was building a legacy. The Monarch Rising Foundation would continue its vital work long after I was gone. The women I was training would go on to train others. The small businesses we were helping launch would employ people, serve communities, and create measurable, lasting value. That commitment to purpose mattered infinitely more than any amount of money in my bank account. My phone buzzed again, vibrating gently on the desk. A text from Trevor's mother, unexpected and stark. Trevor is being released early. You wanted me to tell you. He plans to stay in a halfway house and complete his parole in another state. He won't be contacting you. He just wanted you to know he's sorry for everything and he hopes you're well. I stared at the message for a long moment, processing the cold facts. Trevor released after 11 months instead of 18. Starting over in a new, unfamiliar state with absolutely nothing. No family support, no career prospects, no money, living in a halfway house and trying to rebuild his life from absolute zero. Part of the distant, historical me felt a flicker of satisfaction at that hard consequence. Justice served, the lesson delivered. But mostly, I just felt a quiet, profound nothing. No anger, no soaring vindication, no residual hurt. Trevor was simply a man who had made truly terrible choices and was now stoically living with the severe results. He wasn't my problem anymore. He wasn't even my story anymore. I texted back a short, polite reply. Thank you for telling me. I hope he finds peace. And I genuinely meant it. Not because I had magically forgiven him or forgotten the depth of what he'd done, but because holding on to that toxic anger would only continue to hurt me. Trevor had already cost me 8 years of my life. I wasn't giving him 1 more minute of my time or emotional energy. I deleted the text thread instantly and went back to reviewing my property reports. Later that evening, Daniel arrived for dinner. We ate casually on my terrace overlooking the darkening hills, talking about the major renovation project he wanted to bid on. I reviewed the detailed financials he brought, asked sharp, targeted questions about construction timelines and subcontractor relationships, and calculated the potential long-term returns. You're brilliant at this, Daniel said, watching me work through the complex numbers with intense focus. I've had a lot of practice, I admitted, looking up. Still, the way you instantly see opportunities other people miss, the effortless way you calculate risk down to the percentage point. It's genuinely impressive. I smiled, looking directly into his eyes. You know what else is impressive? That you're not threatened by it. That you asked me to partner with you because of my skills, not despite them. Why would I be threatened by your success, Gabrielle? Your success doesn't diminish mine in any way. If anything, partnering with you makes my company exponentially stronger and more resilient. You'd be surprised how many men don't see it that way. Then they're idiots, he stated simply. Daniel reached across the wrought iron table and took my hand, his grip warm and steady. You're extraordinary, Gabrielle. Building what you've built, surviving what you survived, and then using all of that knowledge and power to actively help other people rise. That's who you are at your core. Why would anyone, especially a partner, ever want to diminish that? I squeezed his hand, feeling something warm, hopeful, and deeply secure expanding in my chest. Maybe this was truly what the next chapter looked like. Partnership instead of competition, genuine support instead of casual dismissal, building something together openly rather than in self-imposed secrecy. Let's do it, I said, the decision solidifying in an instant. The renovation project. Send me the final partnership proposal, and I'll have my attorney review it immediately. But yes, Daniel, I'm in. Daniel's grin was immediate and electric. Really? Really? I think we'll build something truly amazing together. And looking at him across the table, at the project plans spread out between us, at the serene view of the hills behind him and my beautiful, secure home surrounding us, I knew it to be the absolute truth. This was what rebuilding looked like. Not revenge, not self-destruction, not dwelling obsessively on past betrayals, but rather creation, partnership, purpose, and the construction of something infinitely better than what had been lost. Trevor had tried to take everything from me. Instead, he had inadvertently given me the violent push I needed to stop hiding, to publicly reveal my full empire, to step completely into my power, and to build something that mattered far beyond just personal wealth. That, I realized, was the real, undeniable victory. Not that Trevor had lost everything, though he certainly had, but that I had gained something immeasurably more valuable than mere revenge. I had gained myself, my powerful voice, my expansive platform, my purpose, and I was only just getting started. 1 year after the divorce decree was signed, the grand ballroom of the Henderson Building, one of the premier commercial properties I now partially managed, glittered with lights, crystal, and hundreds of elegantly dressed people. It was the Monarch Rising Foundation's first annual gala, a magnificent celebration of a year defined by explosive growth, measurable impact, and profound empowerment. I stood near the entrance in a midnight blue gown, professionally greeting guests as they arrived. Titans of business, major philanthropists, the women we'd helped launch into business, media representatives, and every critical supporter who had been part of the foundation's extraordinary first year of operation. Margaret Bennett arrived with her husband, Robert, both dressed formally and looking immensely proud. Robert approached me first, extending his hand with a warmth that felt entirely new. "Gabrielle," he said, his voice deep with admiration. "This is magnificent. You should be immensely proud of what you have materialized here. Thank you, Mr. Bennett, and thank you for your family's unwavering support. The Bennett Foundation's recent funding has been truly transformative for our expansion efforts. It's Robert, please, and we are deeply honored to be part of what you're building. I spoke with the Henderson Group CEO last week, actually. She mentioned your strategic management of their properties has increased their overall portfolio value by 18% in just 6 months. That's utterly extraordinary performance. I have a very good, dedicated team," I demurred modestly. "You have excellent judgment," Robert corrected me firmly, meeting my eyes, "which is precisely why I wanted to discuss something with you tonight. Bennett Company is looking to aggressively diversify our holdings. We're interested in formally exploring the creation of a substantial real estate division, and frankly, there is no one I trust more to consult on that high-stakes venture than you." I blinked, genuinely surprised by the pivot. "Do you want me to consult for Bennett Company? I want you to consider becoming a partner in Bennett Company's new real estate ventures," he clarified, his tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. "Not an employee, Gabrielle. Partner. Equal voice, equal profit sharing. Your proven expertise combined with our capital could be spectacularly successful." Margaret gently touched her husband's arm, stepping forward to speak directly to me. "What Robert is trying to say is that we have definitively learned our lesson. We will never again dismiss someone's talent or capability based on foolish assumptions or family ties. We see what you've built, Gabrielle, and we want to be part of it, in the right, respectful way." "Let me think about it," I said carefully, allowing the gravity of the offer to settle. "I deeply appreciate the offer, and I am certainly interested, but I would need to review the proposed partnership structure with extreme care." "So of course. Take all the time you need," Robert smiled, the old frost entirely gone. "We're not going anywhere." As they moved deeper into the ballroom, Daniel appeared instantly at my elbow, looking impossibly handsome and grounded in his tailored tuxedo. "Was that what I think it was?" he murmured, leaning close. "A formal business proposition from my ex-husband's parents?" "Yes," I confirmed, taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "That is certainly complicated." "Everything is complicated," I said with a genuine smile, sipping the cold champagne. "But sometimes complicated is good. Our renovation project is complicated, and it's working beautifully." It was true. The historic building renovation was far ahead of schedule and impressively under budget. We had already pre-leased 80% of the commercial space and had a lengthy waiting list for the luxury residential units. The partnership between Daniel's unmatched construction expertise and my strategic property management skills had proven to be extraordinarily effective, both professionally and financially. More than that, our personal relationship had grown steadily stronger, characterized by patience, kindness, and deep mutual respect. There was no rushing, no pressure, just two adults building something wonderful together at their own pace. It was healthy, respectful, and nothing like the desperate performance my marriage to Trevor had been. The gala began with a packed reception where guests mingled and viewed detailed displays showing the foundation's concrete impact. Striking photographs of women diligently working at the workshops, powerful testimonials from the 12 businesses we had successfully helped launch, and clear financial data showing exactly how our programs were creating measurable, life-altering economic empowerment. Rachel stood confidently by one of the displays, talking animatedly with a group of potential major donors. Her consulting business had grown so much, she now employed 3 other women, that she had just hired 2 full-time employees and was already planning to expand her team further. Even more thrilling, she'd purchased her first significant investment property, a large duplex that she was currently gut renovating, leveraging the specialized contractor connections she'd fostered through the foundation's network. She's a phenomenal success story that you should be immensely proud of, Patricia commented, appearing at my side with a freshly refilled flute of champagne. The glow of the gala lights caught the sparkle in her eyes. She did the heavy lifting herself. We simply provided the scaffolding, the resources, and a supportive community. I started to demur, but Patricia shook her head sharply. Don't minimize what you've created here, Gabrielle. This foundation isn't just an organization. It is actively changing the trajectory of women's lives. That is a legacy that matters far more than any high-profile corporate merger. Patricia, over the last year, had evolved from being strictly my attorney to a genuine friend and my most trusted advisor. She served diligently on the foundation's board and had been absolutely instrumental in navigating the complex legal thicket necessary for our rapid expansion plans. How does it feel? Patricia asked softly, her gaze sweeping over the vibrant, celebratory crowd. Standing here, exactly 1 year after everything in your personal life spectacularly imploded, looking at the institution you've built out of the wreckage? It feels like victory, I told her, without hesitation. And honestly, not because Trevor lost anything, but because I finally gained something real, something durable and completely mine. The formal part of the evening's program commenced as the house lights dimmed. Margaret Bennett, stately and elegant, walked to the podium to give the welcome speech. She spoke with eloquent passion about Monarch Rising's mission, emphasizing the crucial importance of financial autonomy for women, and shared how her own deeply ingrained perspectives had been challenged and dramatically shifted over the past 12 months. I spent 4 decades as a supportive spouse, she told the hushed crowd, acknowledging that while that is a valuable and necessary role, it should never be the only role available to ambitious, capable women. She paused, letting the statement sink in. Watching Gabrielle not only build a formidable business empire but do so while navigating a brutal personal betrayal showed me, perhaps more clearly than anything else, the sheer magnitude of what is possible when women unequivocally refuse to be defined or limited by anyone else's expectations. This foundation exists to multiply that possibility for every single woman we can reach. The resulting applause was deafening, a unified roar of approval and shared recognition. Then it was my moment. I walked to the podium, the bright lights momentarily blinding me, and looked out across the 200 faces watching intently. I took a deep, centering breath. A year ago tonight, I began, my voice steady, carrying easily through the ballroom. I was sitting in my executive office doing what I did every day, watching security camera footage. Except that night, I wasn't watching market trends. I was watching my husband usher his pregnant mistress into an apartment I owned, an apartment he had meticulously chosen and furnished, having no idea that the property belonged to my secret holding company. A visible ripple went through the audience. I held their attention. In that precise moment, I had a very simple choice. I could have chosen pure, destructive revenge. I could have focused every single ounce of my intelligence and energy on methodically destroying him. But I didn't. Instead, I chose to pivot. I chose to build something that would prove infinitely bigger than my anger, and certainly bigger than Trevor's petty betrayal. I chose to reveal the empire I'd been quietly creating in secret and use my personal story, that shocking public revelation, to help other women realize that they, too, possess the ability to build their own empires. I paused, scanning the room and meeting the eyes of women who nodded in fierce understanding. Monarch Rising is not, and has never been, about retribution, I declared. It is about radical transformation. It is about taking whatever devastating situation you find yourself in, whether that's betrayal, profound loss, or simply being repeatedly dismissed and underestimated, and using that friction, that raw fuel, to construct something truly meaningful. We build, not despite the staggering obstacles we face, but precisely because of them. I detailed the foundation's explosive growth, the 12 businesses we'd successfully launched, the 3 satellite locations we were preparing to open, the 500 women who had already graduated from our intensive programs, and the strategic partnerships we'd forged with both major corporations and universities. I laid out our ambitious vision for the next 5 years, emphasizing sustainability and broader national reach. Someone asked me recently, I shared, if I could go back and change the past, erase that whole painful experience, would I do it? And the absolute, honest truth is no. Because that deeply painful experience was the necessary catalyst. It gave me the courage to stop hiding my success. It violently forced me to step fully and completely into my power. It led me directly to the creation of this foundation and everything we are building together here tonight. I looked directly at Margaret Bennett, then at Patricia, at Rachel and the other women whose lives were visibly transformed, and then across the room to Daniel, who was supporting me from his seat, and finally toward the various business leaders who had taken my ambition seriously in ways Trevor never once had. The best revenge, I concluded, my voice rising slightly, is never destruction. It is unassailable creation. It is building something so profoundly meaningful and so undeniably successful that the person who wronged you becomes utterly and permanently irrelevant to the ongoing narrative of your life. That is the definition of Monarch Rising. That is what we are helping hundreds of women achieve. And that I want to leave as my singular legacy. Not that I simply survived betrayal, but that I proactively transformed that survival into opportunity for others. The applause was overwhelming, washing over me in waves. As I descended from the podium, women surged toward me from every direction, eager to share pieces of their own stories, thanking me for the foundation's existence, or urgently asking about program enrollments and future opportunities. This felt different from any business success. This was palpable impact. This was genuine meaning. This was the vibrant, tangible community I had always hoped to build. Later in the evening, long after the formal program had concluded and the guests were happily mingling over dessert, I slipped outside onto the enclosed terrace for a rare moment of silence. The city spread out below me like a vast, glittering carpet, millions of lights twinkling against the dark expanse. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the coverage of your gala. What you've built is truly incredible. I'm genuinely sorry for everything. I hope you know that. Trevor. I stared at the short message for a long, silent moment, feeling a strange mix of detachment and finality. Then I carefully typed out a response. Thank you. I hope you're building something meaningful for yourself, too. I didn't bother blocking the number, but I didn't save it either. Trevor was a significant, albeit painful, part of my past. The betrayal that had inadvertently forced me to reveal my full strength and success. But he had absolutely no place in my future. My future was here. This foundation, the ambitious development projects I was now undertaking with Daniel, the massive corporate partnership Robert Bennett had recently proposed, the hundreds of women I was actively helping to empower, and the rapidly growing empire I was continuing to build. But this time, entirely in the open, with zero secrets and certainly zero apologies. Daniel stepped onto the terrace, his arm wrapping around my waist immediately. Everything all right? More than all right, I murmured, leaning into the warmth of his embrace, our eyes tracing the patterns of the city lights. I was just thinking about how radically everything has changed in one short year. You've built something truly extraordinary, he emphasized. We've built something extraordinary, I corrected gently. The renovation project, our shared investments, our partnership, that's ours together. Fair point, he conceded, tightening his arm around my waist. So what's the immediate next step? More duplexes? Another foundation satellite location? Outright world domination? I laughed, the sound light and genuine. Maybe all of the above. I've definitely learned not to put limits on my ambitions. Good. Because watching you dream big, and then methodically achieve those dreams, is one of my favorite things about you. I turned in his arms to look up at him. You know what else I've learned this year? That the right partner doesn't feel the need to diminish your success. They amplify it. They celebrate it. They want to build alongside you, not instead of you or secretly against you. Is this your subtle way of confirming that I am, in fact, the right partner? Maybe, I teased, reaching up to touch his face. I'm also saying that I'm incredibly glad I didn't let Trevor's betrayal make me afraid of genuine partnership, because what we have, both professionally and personally, is so much stronger and deeper than anything I experienced before. Daniel kissed me softly, deliberately, to building something better together. Together, I agreed. We returned inside to the vibrant noise of the gala, to the ongoing celebration of everything the foundation had achieved. But I carried that quiet moment on the terrace with me. That crystalline clarity about what I had truly learned, what I had successfully built, and who I had finally become. Trevor had tried to steal my apartment, my financial security, and ultimately my life as I knew it. Instead, his action had only provided the necessary push for me to claim my power completely, to step decisively out of the protective shadows and into the full public spotlight, transforming a private, hidden success into a powerful public impact. The Riverside penthouse was sold, a distant memory. My marriage was terminated and utterly irrelevant. Trevor was currently rebuilding his own life in a distant state, far removed from mine. But I was here, in my beautiful home, with my thriving business, my deeply meaningful foundation, and my healthy, mutually supportive relationship. I was building something infinitely bigger than myself, creating tangible opportunities for hundreds of other women, and living fully in my own power without apology or the slightest hesitation. That was the crown I wore now, not the fragile, superficial one Trevor had attempted to steal, but the resilient, unbreakable one I had forged myself through hard-won intelligence, unwavering determination, and the resolute refusal to be diminished. It was a crown woven from success, from impact, from transformation, crafted from the ashes of betrayal. And I wore it with an immense and quiet pride. The empire was no longer secret. The victory was no longer just mine. I had taken every destructive thing Trevor had tried to inflict and transformed it into a legacy that would surely outlive us both. A foundation that would empower women for generations, a business that consistently created value and opportunity, and a life that proved, conclusively, that creative success was always the most devastating and effective response to betrayal. Trevor had unknowingly given me his pregnant mistress in my apartment as the unintended catalyst for my necessary revelation. I had seized that catalyst, forged it into a powerful crown, and I was never taking it off.